Okay, good evening. This is the City of Morro Bay City Council meeting. It's the regular meeting being held on Tuesday, March the 8th, 2022. It is 5:30 p.m. and this meeting is being held via teleconference. And I will go ahead and ask our city clerk if she will establish a quorum for us, please.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Addis?
Here.
Councilmember Ford?
Here.
Councilmember Heller?
Here.
Councilmember Barton?
Sorry, I was on mute. I'm here.
And Mayor Heading?
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a quorum. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, and pursuant to Assembly Bill 361 and Government Code Section 54953, this meeting will be conducted telephonically through Zoom and broadcast live on cable channel 20 and streamed on the city website. Please be advised that pursuant to the Assembly Bill 361 and Government Code Section 54953, and to ensure the health and safety of the public by limiting human contact that could spread the COVID-19 virus, the Veterans Hall will not be open for this meeting this evening. With that, I would ask us all if we could just take a moment in your own way, remembering either through prayers or thoughts or meditation, the great country of Ukraine and the devastation that is occurring even as we speak at this minute. The understanding of how blessed we are as a country to be free and have freedom is further, I think, enlightened by this situation. And personally, my heart just breaks for the brave people of Ukraine. So I would like to ask for this special time for each of us to think in our own way, either pray, meditate on the Ukrainian people and their safety, and hopefully the end of this terrible war. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. If we could have our flag, I'll ask you to stand and join me in our Pledge of Allegiance, please. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right, that brings us to our closed session report, and I'll ask our city attorney, Mr. Newmeyer, do we have any closed session reports this evening, sir?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. No closed session items to report tonight.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. That then brings us to mayor and council members' reports, announcements, and presentations. If we have any presentations, that'd be interesting. So let's go ahead and start with Councilmember Barton. Do we have any announcements this evening, please?
None for this evening.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Ford, any announcements this evening?
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I was going to announce my next in-person coffee meet and greet, sort of, you know, come hang out with me and let's chat. But I have to reschedule what I originally had planned for. So if there's anyone out there who's listening, if you'd like to meet with me in person, in the meantime, just please reach out to me at jford@morrobayca.gov, and I would love to meet with you and chat in person. So other than that, I do not have any announcements. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much for that. Councilmember Heller, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Council got an interesting notice recently about a national sailing regatta hosted by the Morro Bay Yacht Club, which is coming to Morro Bay on Labor Day weekend. And this is really an exciting event for the Yacht Club and for the community in general. This is a national regatta, Santa Cruz 27. So those boats will trailered into town and will be at the docks here, and then they will be racing out in the ocean and then returning at the end of the day. And it's quite an exciting event. I'm excited about it as a former sailor. And it'll be great for tourism. They're expecting between 80 and 200 people to be here over Labor Day for that event. So I just want to let everybody know about that if they want to leave town in advance or if they want to stay here for the fun. So that's my announcement. And then, like Councilmember Ford, I'm available to meet, particularly for coffee in the mornings, 805-471-1257. Send me a text or give me a call and we'll set up a time to get together. I do want to know what's on your mind and what you're happy about, and of course, what you're not happy about. So please do call. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Heller. Councilmember Addis, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to wish everyone a happy International Women's Day, and the campaign this year is called Break the Bias. And according to the campaign, it's imagining a gender equal world, a world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination, a world that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive, a world where difference is valued and celebrated, and that together we can forge women's equality. And so I've seen many of you out there posting and celebrating, and I too want to celebrate this day with all of you. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that announcement. And I have a couple of announcements that I'll share with you. First, just today, we received in the mail notice from the Arbor Day Foundation that the city of Morro Bay has been formally recognized as a Tree City USA. And the letter briefly states Morro Bay was named a 2021 Tree City USA by the Arbor Day Foundation to honor its commitment to effective urban forest management. Morro Bay achieved Tree City USA recognition by meeting the program's 4 requirements. 1, forming a tree board or department. 2, creating a tree care ordinance. 3, having an annual community forestry budget of at least $2 per capita. And 4, an Arbor Day observance and proclamation. The Tree City USA program is sponsored by the Arbor Day Foundation in partnership with the U.S. Forest Service and the National Association of State Foresters. Congratulations, City of Morro Bay. Thanks to Mr. Greg Kwolek, our Public Works Director, Mr. Scott Collins, our City Manager, and any and all of the folks in our city that worked to help us achieve that. So this is great for Morro Bay, and we appreciate that. Second, we did have, or the Chamber did have their gala event. We went to New Orleans to celebrate. Actually, we were at the community center, but it was turned into a Mardi Gras celebration on Friday night. My thanks to the Chamber for a wonderful program, a wonderful evening, and especially the recognition of significant individuals in our community. Wanted to share with you that our Citizen of the Year for this year was none other than our Chief of Police, Jody Cox. Congratulations, Chief Cox, on your recognition. Our Living Treasure, Carol Truesdale. Carol, if you're listening, congratulations on being the Living Treasure this year. Greatly deserved award on your part. The not-for-profit group of the year was the Lions Club. Appreciate all the work that they do in the community. And then last, but certainly not least, our business of the year was Coalesce Bookstore and Wedding Chapel. And so kudos and congratulations to all of the winners. Greatly deserved this year. A wonderful event of recognition of volunteerism and celebration in Morro Bay. And so thank you, Erica Crawford, President and CEO of the Chamber. Thank you, Chamber Board, for all that you do for the community and for recognizing these wonderful folks. Lastly, as we mentioned, I believe last week, we do plan to go live with regard to our city council meetings, beginning with the first council meeting in April. We will be back at the Vets Hall. That will occur on the second Tuesday. Apologize, I don't have the date here. But again, beginning in April, live city council meetings. We're looking at the potential for a hybrid model to be able to call in and give public comment, as well as to come and be present at the Veterans Hall. So I know we're all looking forward to getting back together and being back in public meetings. With regard to that, speaking of office hours and coffee invitations, I previously, prior to the pandemic, did about once a quarter town halls. I will be reinitiating the town halls. I'll be holding those at the community center. I do not have a date yet for the first one, but that would be just myself opening up and being available to answer any questions with as many people that want to come out and just meet one-on-one with me. And I look forward to, at our next meeting, announcing the date when I might be able to begin that. So thank you for that. I'll turn it over to Mr. Collins this evening for your report, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. I wanted to bring up Public Works Director Greg Qualick to introduce a new employee for the city. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Scott, and good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm very pleased to introduce to you all our new city engineer. He just started yesterday. Still learning where the water cooler is, but I just want to tell you that this is such a critical role for us. The city engineer oversees the capital projects, and based on us being really absorbed by the wharf, we unfortunately haven't gotten that much done in the past year. And so I'm working with Eric to turn that around. Eric has a background in pavement management from the city of Santa Maria. He has 15 years of experience as a registered civil engineer. He has a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Cal Poly and a geotechnical engineering degree, a master's degree from Cal State Berkeley. And he's just a great all-around guy. He also happens to be a Morro Bay resident. So again, we are working to bring back capital projects to the city of Morro Bay, and also in the long term to begin some capital planning, which I know this council is very interested in, as we are, to help us prioritize our capital improvements here in the city. So I'd just like to, Mayor, if I may, give it over to Eric for a moment to introduce himself.
Absolutely. Thank you. Eric, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council, everyone listening. It's with great pleasure that I take on this role as the city engineer for the city that I love and live in. So it's something I don't take lightly, and I know there's many challenges ahead and many exciting things ahead for the city. So I'm just very excited to be part of this public works team with Greg and all the great people here with the city of Morro Bay. So thank you. And if you ever need to reach me, you have my email, and look forward to working with all of you.
And Mayor, if I may add, I've already informed Eric about our ordinance about wearing not wearing ties.
Absolutely.
So as you can see, he's not wearing a tie.
Thank you for that. And did you also let him know that you did receive a public flogging as a result of the fact that you wore ties twice when you attended meetings? So
that's correct. I did tell him that. So I'm spreading the word.
Good. Eric, I also wanted to, on behalf of the council, thank you for your work as a volunteer on our Public Works Advisory Board. Everybody may not know that, again, Eric is a resident of Morro Bay and applied and was selected to serve on that board. So thank you for your tenure and your service there. Unfortunately, he will have to give that up now, being a city employee. But again, thanks for that. And we look forward to meeting you personally and getting to know you much better. Again, thanks, Eric.
Thank you, everyone.
Mr. Collins, did you have other stuff?
That was all for tonight, Mayor. Thank you. And confirming that the first council meeting will be in person will be April 12th, Tuesday, April 12th. And
Thank
that
you.
will allow us sufficient time for the testing at the Vets Hall to complete for COVID testing in the North County or North Coast area.
Great. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. Councilmember Heller had a comment, I think.
Yes, Mayor, could I ask Eric how he pronounces his last name so we don't all ask him that over the next few weeks?
You bet.
It's radio like radio, so that's the easiest way to remember it.
Radio, okay. Thank
Yeah.
you very much. Welcome aboard, Eric. Glad to have you.
Indeed. Thanks. Appreciate it. Okay, I'll turn it over to Mr. Collins. We do have a presentation tonight. The annual update from our partner, Central Coast Community Energy, of which the city of Morro Bay is a member. I believe we have Susan Davison, the account specialist, here with us tonight. But Scott, I'll turn it over to you for the introductions, please.
Yes, thank you. Susan's been a part of the CCE team long before, before it changed names, I believe that's right, yeah. And we appreciate all the great work that Susan and the rest of the CCE team does on behalf of the city of Morro Bay residents, many of whom are part of that JPA, where we have choice for our community in terms of the energy, where it's procured and moving towards a greener energy source, and also maintaining parity with PG&E and in terms of rates, and also additional programming opportunities. So really delighted to have Susan here tonight to present on some of those fronts, and here to answer any questions you all may have. Thank you.
Welcome, Susan.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. Can I share screen?
You certainly may.
Okay. All right. Can you all see the screen?
Looks good.
Thank you. All right. I want to say good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you for this opportunity to have a conversation. I think I dressed correctly. I'm wearing no tie today. I am Susan Davison, and I'm known as the Key Account Specialist with Central Coast Community Energy. And so CCAs actually offer an opportunity for communities such as Morro Bay to join together to choose their source of electricity. So whether it be PG&E or whether it be in partnership with Central Coast Community Energy, the customer gets a choice. The city joins Central Coast Community Energy to gain more control over your electricity needs and also to provide economic and environmental benefits to the community. And so we actually procure the energy, which is then delivered via PG&E's transmission and distribution lines to the customers. The revenue that is generated, what we call our operational revenue, it stays local and it keeps electricity rates lower for our customers while also funding our energy programs. And Central Coast is actually one of 13 CCAs that collaborate in PG&E territory this way. There are actually 23 CCAs in California. There's a lot of acronyms, I'm really sorry. 23 CCAs in California that serve more than 11 million customers. But California is not the first state to start this. Actually, there are CCAs also back on the East Coast. The additional benefit is that actually the revenue. As a customer, you get to participate in both PG&E programs, energy programs, and our programs. And we are very protective, I say, of our customers in the fact that we stack our rebates. So the customers are going to actually take advantage of, let's say, an air quality rebate, as well as our rebate too. So we try to make our benefits so that they actually make sense for the businesses and customers that we serve. This map reflects our service area, which includes now 33 communities. The city of Buellton is just finishing their enrollment. As they started in January, they'll finish at the end of March. And the city of Atascadero, so you'll see there's a little space over here that's a little not dark green yet. The city of Atascadero voted to join us actually, and will do so in 2024. It takes a while for it to occur. They have to do an implementation plan. The implementation plan is sent to the commission, and then it takes a year before customers are allowed to enroll. This is actually our governance. We have a policy, operations, and a community, now I'm not going to be able to talk, our Community Advisory Council. The first two, policy and operations, actually vote. So the city of Morro Bay seat is shared with the city of San Luis Obispo and with Paso Robles. Jan Marks, the council member of the city of Paso Robles, is the current representative holding the chair seat on the policy board. And then the city manager of San Luis Obispo is the current representative holding the shared seat on the operations board. As with shared seats, the cities themselves determine how and when the seat is shared with the other cities. It's not something that we actually determine. And over the past 3 years, we actually would like to highlight some of our accomplishments. The first we're very proud of is our economic vitality. And so more than $50 million in customer benefits as of the end of last year. And we take our operational revenue and put it into reduced rates, as well as our energy programs. This year, $14 million set aside for energy programs for our customers, businesses, municipalities, and residents. The second that we're really proud of is we are actually the first CCA in California to get an S&P A credit rating, which means that we can actually enter into long-term energy contracts that result in rate stability and lower costs for our customers. We're very proud of that. We have a very fiscally responsible CEO that actually keeps our rates low. This actually showcases we currently have contracts in place for 60% of our energy to be renewable, clean and renewable. That's a big goal. We're like 5 years ahead of the utilities. And then by 2030, our goal is 100%. But here's what's really fun about this conversation is that because renewables are lower in cost now, our goal is that we will have the lower rates and yet 100% renewable by 2030. So we're very pleased about the benefits we bring to our communities. And this slide showcases that says that we assist the city of Morro Bay in seamlessly reaching your benefits, economic and environmental benefits for both your city residences and your businesses. And at this time, we have long-term contracts. So I said we have the contract signed. A couple of them are slowed down a bit because of procurement, COVID procurement. And so we just had another conversation about it this morning. We're paying attention to making sure that these projects come online, and we're working towards our goal of 2030. This slide actually reflects our historic rates. Our rates are actually not set by us. And so for over the years, we have actually done what's called a utility less discount. So if PG&E's rate, let's say, was 6 cents, we would then discount off that rate. Currently, there are 75 different rates in PG&E territory. So it is a little bit of work to make sure we stay current in all this. And we're very proud of this because we actually have been reducing our rates. And so this is an example of what we've done. When COVID hit in 2020, we actually took part of our rate reserve and actually gave our customers, all of our customers across the Central Coast, 50% discount on their electric on their bill for May and June. So that's how we think as a public agency about how to take those resources and bring them back into the community. So currently, this is what's happening this month. As of March 1st, okay, we actually have a new service offering. So rather than be what's called an IOU less a discount, we actually no longer are following PG&E's rates. And our goal as an agency is to have predictable and stable rates for a 3-year period. If anyone's paying attention to the utility rates, every quarter the rates are changing now, and they change on your bill. And because they're all bundled, most of us actually don't know. We just know that our bill goes up. Our goal is to have stable rates for 3 years. That's where we're going as an agency. And so to give an example, PG&E applied for a rate increase. They changed their rates in January. They applied for a rate increase with the commission in March, and it was an 18% rate increase. That's why we're unhinging from the PG&E rates. And so it's been approved. And so what's going to happen is the new rates, each meter at somebody's house or business has its own meter read date. None of them are the same. And so what happens is when that meter is read, then as of March of that date is when the new rates start. And so we're seeing on our side of the rates, anywhere from a 6%, we're going to be 6% lower on the big commercial, up to like 18% lower actually on some of our residential. And so we're very pleased about this service offering that we're bringing to our communities. And because you've been with us for a while, everybody gets to actually take advantage of this. So kudos to all of us. And as a public agency, our operational revenues are reinvested back into rate reduction, rate stability, and energy programs. So this slide here is an example of the different kinds of programs that we create. And so as a customer, you're served by both PG&E. PG&E does the billing, the meters, and the grid, and then we actually do the electricity. So most people don't know we're about 35 or 40% of your bill. We're not the total of the bill. We're a piece of the bill, which is why we have our own page in the bill. And so because you're served by both of us, you actually can take advantage of programs from both of us. So for example, the utilities across California are really paying attention to electric transportation and lots of EV infrastructure chargers and infrastructures going in. We also have a program, and that program is stackable on top of the PG&E's program. So this is another example of our programs. As our member agencies, and we have actually created something that's called a member agency services. And we had the pleasure of actually having a conversation with Greg Krolick about this specific program. So we learned more about the needs of the city of Morro Bay. And so this is an example of a program that we've created that is just for our municipal agencies. That means our cities and our counties. And so what it is let's say a street sweeper needs to be replaced. So what happens is you get a quote on the street sweeper, and we have up to a $250,000 rebate that goes to the city. We can write a check to the city or to your vendor for getting that sweeper to be all electric. We also make sure that we work with PG&E so that the infrastructure to actually charge that sweeper is actually something that's in place. So by the time you get that vehicle, you actually can plug it in and charge it and not just have it sit there. So this is an example of the programs that we continue to think about for our member agencies that roll back into saying thank you. And as the face of your community, this is our way of saying you're valuable, and let's make sure that the services that you're able to provide to the community actually are use part of our rates savings. And so you take advantage of that too, just not one business or one homeowner, but the city actually can take advantage of it too. And this is an example of how we think about our programs and how we change them over time. So last year we had like a EV program, but then we weren't thinking about somebody with a 1960s house that actually has to upgrade their electrical panel to actually plug their electrical vehicle in. And so what we did this year was we created a bucket of 4 different items here. So you've got cars, and then we have the chargers. We have something called EV Readiness, which means that we're going to pay for all the labor to put the charger that, let's say, goes in front of the city office or city hall. And then there's another bucket of actually like e-motorcycles for like a police force. We also have one for e-bikes. I get to take credit for the e-bikes because I really wanted an e-bike. So we have e-bike rebates also. $500 for an electric e-bike if I'm a resident. And if I buy local, another $100 for that. And so that's how, again, another type of program. What I really like about this program is that it's different buckets, and you as a homeowner or a business get to choose which one you're going to touch first. So maybe this year I want to put in the panel so it actually can put my vehicle in, and then next year I'm going to go shopping for the vehicle. So, or you could do the vehicle first and then do the panel afterwards. And so it's a way of making sure that all the pieces that a homeowner or business needs is actually accessible, and that they get to choose how they're going to access that rebate. So these are the statistics the city is doing. So let's take a look at this number over here. 97% of your residents and businesses are still with us. So that's a little bit of saying we provide good benefit to the residents. We're very proud of that. And so we also show down here is the energy programs. And as of just the last 3 months, $22,000 has been applied for by your residents and businesses. We also are committed to expanding access across our community. And so we actually do a lot of events in Spanish. We do a lot of farm worker outreach. And so this is an example of a farm worker outreach we did in San Luis Obispo County. And it's part of a new partnership that we developed because we want to make sure that we're reaching the whole span of our constituents across the community. And so this is an example of some of the in-person events that we do. We also have a customer portal that we created. Sometimes customers want to know what's happening with their bill and they want answers. And so customers that receive service from us can actually go in. The site is listed here. It's only in PG&E territory, and a customer can actually go in and take a look at the different kinds of offerings and seeing how they're using their energy. We also have a call center, which shows up in the bill on our bill page. And our call center, we train them every couple weeks so that they can respond quickly and clearly to anyone who calls in. And if someone calls in and our call center cannot answer that question, they then get escalated to someone like me, who has years and years of background in the energy world, and we actually pick up the phone and reach out and call and have a conversation. So we're making sure that the whole range of individuals are feeling like we are of service to them. That's why we're here doing business. The last piece that I want to share here is that if there are any small and local vendors, because this is a public presentation, those vendors can actually sign up at our vendor registry. We pay attention to making sure that our business is shared local. So I'll give you a good example. There is a bus that goes from Santa Maria down south called the Clean Air Express. And that Clean Air Express, it is parked at a station that actually uses our 100% renewable. So they charge the bus with our renewables. Our advertising is on the side of the bus. And that advertising was actually created by a local company in Santa Maria. So we're making sure that there's this full cycle and circle of the services that we bring back into the community. And so just a few highlights, how we actually, our pathway and updates about who we are. And then I mentioned the call center. This is the information. And so this shows up again on the bill. So customers can always reach out and call us and talk to us. So any questions? I've been talking for a little bit, so can I ask if there are any questions? Anybody want to let me stop talking for a moment?
Yeah, Susan, thank you. If you want to just take your screen down, I can see hands if there are any questions. And very comprehensive overview. Very, very much appreciate that. Appreciate the partnership, recognizing that Morro Bay became part of CCC very, very early. We're proud of that and proud of all the work that you're doing. I have just a quick question. What's the easiest way for an individual to access the array of rebate programs that you have? Go directly to the website? Are there things that come in the bill that speak to those programs?
So we actually have a website. And I'll make sure it's listed in the presentation. It's www.3cenergy.org. All right, and do we have a chat box? No, we don't. Okay, so it's www.3cenergy.org.
Got it.
And across the top of that webpage is all sorts of drop downs. And so there's accounts, and you can actually click on there. It drops down, and we post all our rates, both our previous rates and our current rates, so you can see that. The next drop down box says energy programs, and energy programs has the whole suite. So in that drop down, you're going to see one of them says member agency services. That is specifically to the programs I talked about with Greg that actually apply to the city of Morro Bay. And then also they go down transportation and others clicks. And those are all the different programs a customer can actually learn about. We make it super simple so you can actually click on it. It takes you to the page of the program, and you can actually do your application online. And it says, here's what you need before you start your application. So you have all your papers or your account number before you even start your application. And then we actually also show the program's email, because sometimes the customer says, well, I submitted my application a week ago and I haven't heard. And the reality is that they can email programs and get an answer on their application too.
Great. And not to embarrass you, but I just wanted to make one clarification to show that I was listening. Jan Marks, our board representative, is from San Luis Obispo City Council, not Paso Robles. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clarified so people knew who our representative was. So with that,
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
No worries. Councilmember Heller, you have a question, sir.
I do. Susan, thank you so much for your presentation. just to clarify for myself and any listeners, you basically procure electricity generated from renewable sources. Is that fair to say?
Correct. Currently, about 60% about 35% of what we have is renewable, okay? We're a little bit ahead of the utilities. We have the contracts in place for the next year and a half, so we'll be 60% renewable. And then our goal is by 2030, all of those contracts are not completed in place, but that's where we're heading. We buy in the same market as the utilities do, and most people don't know there are 2,200 firms and organizations that put power in the market, into the California market, and we all buy from the same market. So it's a very robust place to buy your energy.
Okay, and I like your goal about it being on 100% renewables by 2030 for our city. Is that a realistic goal based on the trend that you see from electric generators?
So I would say yes, but I think the timelines are getting pushed out a tiny bit because of the issues with procuring things. So we had the 60% contracts in place, and we have two projects. We just had two projects go live in the last couple months, but we have two projects that are having issues procuring the pieces they need. And so if we have a 2-year contract for them to build and be up and running by 2025, we're seeing those timelines being pushed a little bit, okay? What I do know is the gentleman who heads our power procurement actually worked at PG&E, so he really knows the business well. He's been in the business 30-some years. And he actually was the individual who signed some of the first renewable contracts ever in the state of California. So he is I'm going to be really nice and say he's a penny pincher. He really pays attention to the contracts, which is to our benefit. So we really are very aware of it. And the other thing that we're doing, I like you asking this question because it's like, there's a little, I would say, push and tug going on right now, because the goal to get to the 30% is not to buy our energy from Utah, okay, and then put it on the lines. The goal is to actually have much more local procurement. And so one of the things that we did this last fall is we put out a RFP to all the cities to saying, do you have any sites where we could put some battery storage? And we called it front of the meter BESS. That's battery electric storage systems. BESS is we have lots of acronyms. And so the goal is to actually put more grid reliability across our Central Coast, not just the 100% renewable, but to actually say, let's look at where the grid's a little bit fragile. Let's drop in some battery storage at sites that are owned by cities and counties that actually are close and tied to the grid and can be utilized for what I would call grid stability and reliability. And so we had 70 sites given to us last fall. And of those 70 sites, about 30 of them, each one of them had to have a developer who specialized in battery storage. And currently we're going through them, and we have some very fascinating sites that are actually going to get built in the Central Coast. So it's not only the renewables and the keeping the rates low, but it's also that resilience, because, you know, we all rely on PG&E's infrastructure. And so we as an agency keep thinking about how do we make sure this is really, really, really how we serve our customers and what's safe for all of us.
That's great. And of course, we might be getting a battery storage facility here in Morro Bay.
A big one.
Yeah. Well, Susan, thank you for that information. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Heller. Any other council questions for Susan? Seeing no hands. Susan, again, thank you for being here tonight. Appreciate all the good work that the organization is doing, and thanks so much for the contact information that you've given us. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to public comment. This is public comment, general public comment for items that are on the agenda for which you can't stay and would like to speak to now, or any other comments you'd like to make to the city of Morro Bay. A general public comment is now opened. And let's see, Highland, I'll ask if we have any public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First up is Don Maruska.
Okay. Welcome, Don.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. It's my pleasure to be with you. I want to speak to C3, which I cannot stay, to speak at the time you'll be addressing it at the end of the session. But I'm strongly in favor of the action to have a subcommittee formed to help in implementing through the residences and businesses the intent and scope and efforts of the emergency climate resolution that you passed at your last session. And I want to congratulate the council and staff in taking such a quick action, the first session right after passing that resolution. I think that sends in itself a good message to the community about how seriously you're taking this. And I think it was something that is truly very serious for us. You opened the session talking about a moment of silence for the people in Ukraine. We're having the challenges that we are with in Ukraine because the Russians have the oil and gas that fuels their ambitions. And so if we want to be doing our part, and I know many of us are wondering, what can we do to help Ukraine? One of the things is to become an energy freedom fighter. If we reduce our use of energy, if we switch to renewables, get off of oil and gas, if we're doing things that enable us to be more efficient, we will be doing an important part in the global effort to free us from the binds of the oil and gas constraints that are really driven by countries that we don't control and who are taking advantage of us and of others around the world. So let me speak a little bit about this. I did reach out because I wanted to be sure in encouraging you to take this action, that in fact there were elements in the community, businesses and residences and community members that would be behind you and work with you in this. And I'm pleased to report, in talking with the leadership of the Morro Bay Chamber, that they have members of the executive committee that are very interested in this topic. Morro Bay and Bloom is very interested. In fact, their upcoming America in Bloom application asked them to specifically say, what are they doing in this area? And so a tree planting program that they could do in conjunction with EcoSlow, which is another group that I spoke with. EcoSlow has tree planting funding from the state. It's got a green business program that can highlight our businesses and get our businesses more awareness and more customers. Is a wonderful way for us to work and collaborate, but we need the city to be an important convener of these entities and interests, to collaborate with the city on things and to celebrate the results. And so I'm very excited about this. I hope that you will enthusiastically create this subcommittee, and I look forward to supporting your efforts in the community for us to make this successful for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Highland, next public comment, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next up, we've got Betty Winholtz.
Welcome, Betty.
Welcome, good evening. This is Betty Winholtz. Speaking of, I don't know if you considered energy, but certainly utilities. Our water bill changed this month, and I was wondering if we could have some explanation. One is that you want us to start sending our money to the bank instead of to the city. And I'm wondering how much cost savings that is, because that was the message, that we're doing this to save money. And then the second thing was, it looks like we're being charged for 3 units, regardless of whether we just use 1 unit or 3. So if someone could speak to those 2 new pieces of information, or my misunderstanding of them. And then just finally, glad to hear the council will be meeting in April in person. And how does that fit then with the city's committees? Will they also begin the 1st of April and having their monthly meetings? Thank you.
Thank you. Highland, next public comment.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next up, we have Linda Winters.
Okay. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you. I don't know if you heard me yelling yay about the first live city council meeting, but I was definitely screaming and yelling. My presentation today actually involves live meetings. When I spoke to you last on February 22nd of the importance of in-person council meetings, here we are 2 days short of 2 full years since March 10th, the last live meeting we had. I was reflecting today about what happened then. I was sitting in the back row of the Vets Hall, my usual position, listening to all the city issues, and had spoke during public comment about the flood of 1995. During the break, several regulars spoke to me and came to me, and the last person that came to me was our Red Davis. He leaned over and gave me a big hug and said some special thoughts about my family, and he thanked me for being involved. That was the last time I saw him in person. He always stressed the importance of working at the local level. Grand projects don't begin at the top of the pyramid, but down at the base where the foundation is laid. To add to that thought, I want to talk about a bit about the Women's March rally that I attended in this past Saturday, along with Councilwomen Jen Ford and Dawn Addis. A repeated theme of women in government and working in businesses, women as volunteers, women as the foundation of a multitude of businesses, educational blocks that hold positions of extreme corporate importance all the way down to the cleaning crew. Equally as dependent on each other. I plan to keep holding my position at city council meetings and plan to keep working for and towards the ultimate goals I set for myself and the residents that live in mobile home parks here in Morro Bay. And I am so looking forward to seeing all of your shining faces on April 12th. I will see you then. Thank you very much. And P.S. I miss Red Davis and his support for mobile home park residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Highland, next public comment, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Up next, we have Carol Truesdale.
There you go, our treasure.
Welcome, Carol.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Heading, council staff, and the staff of the city of Morro Bay. This is regarding C1. I'm sorry I have a conflict tonight that I can't attend the entire meeting, but I did want to say this. I'm Carol Truesdale, resident of Morro Bay since 1995 and a homeowner. The citizens of Morro Bay spoke their minds in their signing of the petition to not have RV dry camping on the Embarcadero. We followed the required protocol and our voices need to be heard in a voting environment. As Betty Windholtz wrote in her March 8th agenda correspondence, please remember, this started out as a pilot program and continues to be a temporary program not yet approved by the California Coastal Commission. Therefore, the funds should not be seen as a permanent source of money for the Harbor Enterprise Fund. This program was conceived in 2019, so I'm wondering why the actual financials from that time forward are not part of the fiscal impact report. They were part of an early report that came to council. In addition, the Harbor Fund continues to be balanced, and what is needed are capital funds that are more appropriately sought through state and federal grants. Finally, and obviously, the voters would prefer addressing this sooner rather than later, so the June ballot would be preferred. Thank you for hearing, listening, and honoring the citizens of Morro Bay voices. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Highland, next public comment, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It looks like our last public commenter is Melanie Williams Mahan.
Welcome, Melanie. Melanie, are you there? Highland, is she muted? Do you know?
It looks like she disconnected from the meeting.
Okay. Well, if she does come back in, let me know and I'll try to see if we can fit her in.
I see her back in the meeting with her hand raised. I'm going to try to allow her to talk again.
All right.
Hi.
Hi, we lost you.
Okay, so I know. I don't know what happened.
Welcome, Melanie.
Anyway, hi, it's Melanie. Regarding C1 dry camping, please allow the citizens of Morro Bay a voice, and please bring this to a vote in June. The people of this city have watched so many mistakes go through the consent calendar with only minimal comment from council. Dry camping in Morro Bay is a very contentious subject. Some think it's unsightly, unsanitary, and uncalled for. Some think it's a great way to make a quick buck, although not as much as I thought. I can't think of a good reason not to bring this to a June vote. People who live here and care about our home have worked very hard to make this vote happen. Please don't disappoint us and let us have a voice and a vote. On another subject, Raymond Parcell sounds fantastic for recreation and parks, and yay, thanks Raymond. Also, congratulations to Carol Truesdale. You're amazing and kind, and we're all lucky to know you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, thanks, bye.
Thank you, Melanie. Highland, do we have any other hands raised?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do not have any other hands raised.
Okay, I'll close public comment, bring it back to council. Just perhaps a quick follow-up regarding the water bill changes. Any update, Mr. Collins, on that specific question?
Yeah, I'll let Sarah speak to the lockbox
Oh,
situation.
okay, sure.
But for Ms. Winholtz or anybody who has a question on their bill, we suggest they either call the front office or come in Monday through Thursday 8 to noon to go over that bill with us. So
Okay.
be happy to explain that and just to look at it, see what's going on with anyone's bill. And the other question was related to the advisory board meetings. And yes, after the April 12th council meeting sort of serve as a re-inauguration of in-person meetings. And we anticipate that the board and commission meetings would follow suit thereafter. Sarah, thanks.
Great. And in response to the question about the changing address to remit bills, bills can be remitted to City Hall still at any point in time, but the auto-populated address will be changing next month. It was actually supposed to change this month, so I think that may be the reason for some of the confusion. Unfortunately, the billing service reverted the address back to City Hall for this month, which is fine. We will accept the bills at City Hall. And we also do have the PO box on our website. And for anyone listening, it's PO Box 681, Rodeo, California 94572. But again, we can accept bills here at City Hall, and next month's bills will have that PO box auto-populated. The efficiency that the city is realizing from that, again, is related to saved staff time and not opening between 2,000 and 3,000 hard copy checks each month. So as a reminder, residents can pay their bills. There are several ways to pay their bills, including paperless billing. But for those who would like to pay with check, those will be processed by a third party that will be able to do that at a lower cost than city staff.
The other question was, is there a 3-unit minimum billed amount?
I think it would be preferable to see Ms. Winholtz's bill specifically. We have some fixed rates and some tiered rates. And so if we could look at her bill specifically, that would be more accurate.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate the feedback on that.
Sure.
Okay, that brings us to our consent agenda. This is item A on this evening's agenda. I'll go ahead and open up public comment. This is public comment for items A1 and A2 only, our consent agenda. And Highland, do we have any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do not see any raised hands in the queue.
All right, I'll close public comment, bring it back to council. Unless there are any items to pull, I would entertain a motion one way or the other on the consent agenda. Hearing none, I'll go ahead and move approval of item A1 and A2.
I'll second.
I'll second. Oh, go ahead.
Motion by Mayor Heading, seconded by Councilmember Heller to approve item A1 and A2. Any further discussion? Seeing no hands raised, we'll do a roll call vote on this item, please. Thank you.
Councilmember Addis,
Yes.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Councilmember Heller,
Yes.
Councilmember Barton,
Yes.
and Mayor Heading.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Great, thank you. That completes the consent agenda. Brings us to our public hearing item for the evening. This is item B-1 on the agenda. This is review and adoption of the final funding recommendations for the 2022 Community Development Block Grant Program. As a reminder, Council did review this on December 14th and approved the information tonight is a public hearing regarding this item. So B1, format will be staff presentation on B1, followed by council questions. After that, I will open up the public hearing, ask for public comment. And after the completion of public comment, we'll close the public hearing, bring it back to council to have further discussion or entertain a motion. And with that, welcome Cindy Jason. It's up to you, ma'am.
Good evening. Thank you
Good
very
evening.
much. And good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Yes, this is a public hearing item. I have a presentation, so I will share that screen with you. And there it is. This is an item to discuss the city's participation in the Community Development Block Grant Program. The city is a member of the Urban County Consortium, which is a partnership that we have with the county and most of the cities in the county that allows for federal entitlement CDBG funding from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And this will be just a brief presentation. Our funding for this year, as discussed in December, for the 2022 program year is anticipated to be approximately $57,000. And it was on December 14th, 2021 that the council held a public hearing to review and consider draft funding recommendations. Those recommendations were forwarded to the County Board of Supervisors for their required 30-day public noticing period. We did not receive any comments from the public after the council's December meeting, and so the recommendations have not changed. The applications that the city received are on the screen, and these also include a brief project description. We received 2 funding applications, one from People's Self-Help Housing and also one from the 5 Cities Homeless Coalition. As you will note on the slide, the funding requested does exceed what we have available to award, and that is due to a federal cap on public service funding, which limits jurisdiction to awarding no more than 15% of its allocation toward public service activities. And so the recommendation is to roll over the unallocated funds to next year, to the 2023 program year. And then the 4th item on the screen is the city's request for program administration costs. And this pays for city staff time. Fortunately for the city, the majority of the federal compliance requirements are handled by the county planning department. And so staff's recommendation is to approve the 2022 final funding recommendations as outlined on the screen for People's Self-Help Housing and 5 Cities Homeless Coalition by adopting City Council Resolution 2122 for a total funding allocation of $57,656. And then also to authorize the city manager to make any pro rata adjustments to the allocation based on our final congressional allocation. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I am available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate that information with the update on presenting that to the county and with no comments being made. So thanks. I'll ask if there are any council questions of Cindy at this time regarding the CDBG program for 2022. Seeing no raised hands, I will go ahead and open up public comment. And this is opening of the public hearing. Public comment is now open for item B-1. And Highland, do we have any public comments, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are no raised hands in the queue.
Okay, I will close public comment, bring it back to the council, and I will close the public hearing and entertain either a motion or any discussion that council would like to have at this time.
I'd like to move approval of this item.
All right.
I'll second it.
So we have a motion by Councilmember Barton for the staff recommendation, second by Councilmember Ford. And is there any further discussion regarding the item? Seeing no hands going up. All right, we'll go ahead and ask for a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Addis,
Yes.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Councilmember Heller,
Yes.
Councilmember Barton,
Yes.
and Mayor Heading.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you again, Cindy. Appreciate the update and the
you.
presentation. That brings us to our first business item of the evening. This is item C-1. This is to receive and discuss a report on the effects of the proposed citizens initiative petition entitled Initiative Measure to Prohibit Tent Camping and All Classes of Vehicle Camping, Dry or Otherwise, in certain specified areas of the city of Morro Bay, and either 1, adopt the ordinance without alteration, or 2, submit the ordinance to the qualified voters of the city as a proposed measure at the June special municipal election or November regular municipal election. And I'm going to be turning this over, I think, to Mr. Collins. Or
yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm going to quickly share my screen for a quick PowerPoint to share with you all. Is that lining up okay?
Perfect.
All right, great. Okay. So again, brief presentation since this has come before council earlier in this year in February. So in short, we did receive from a community residents who had brought forward an initiative measure to prohibit tent camping in all classes of recreational vehicle camping, dry or otherwise, in certain specified areas of the city. They brought that forward to the staff in the end of December, and we had conducted the vetting of that and found that they had sufficient number of signatures to bring it forward to City Council to either put it forward on the ballot or adopt or seek further information from staff. And this was back in February when this was brought forward to council, at which point City Council directed staff to bring forward more information on the impacts of the initiative, whether it was adopted through an ordinance or through the vote of the people. So in short, again, this again would sort of make it illegal to do tent camping or RV camping along certain aspects or portions of the city, primarily Embarcadero Road, including Tylands Park, along Coleman Drive, and up to and including Morro Rock parking lots. And this would not affect any current private businesses that operate those kind of businesses in those areas. So as council directed staff at the February meeting was to bring back an impact analysis of the impacts of such initiative were to go forward, again, either succeeding at the ballot or if adopted by council. According to election codes 9212, if such a report is requested, we would consider the following 8 areas of impact. So we did that analysis. It was summarized within the staff report, but also attached as a standalone report. And I just want to thank Community Development, Harbor Department, of course, Dana Swanson and Heather Goodwin at the clerk's office, as well as the city attorney's office, did a lot of work quickly to get this turned around in time for the 30 days to bring it forward to council. So in short, there were a couple areas where there was significant but impact worthy of reporting. The first is, of course, the impact to revenue reduction. The staff did analysis of if we had a true 1-year run on this program. We've had portions of last year and portions of this fiscal year. And if you summed it all together and did a little bit of extrapolation, we would anticipate that the annual revenues to the Harbor Fund would be in the $115,000 to $155,000 per year. And then the general fund would have an offshoot of transit occupancy tax between $13,000 to about $18,000 a year. So again, if this initiative was successful, either as an adoption of an ordinance or approved by the voters, those revenues would cease to come to the Harbor Fund and to the general fund. The second impact, which I'll let Mr. Graham speak to, and I think he'll share his own screen on the maps, is that the zoning classifications in Plan Morro Bay anticipated to be reviewed by Planning Commission and City Council within the next several months would actually eliminate all but certain current Tidelands campsites of the current campsites run by the city. Plan Morro Bay is currently written would prevent operation of approximately 85% of the current city-run camping sites otherwise subject to the proposed measure. Of course, these are draft, these aren't final zoning classifications, so it certainly could be changed and modified if that was the direction and desire of City Council, but this initiative certainly brings into question whether that would be a good move or not. So with that, I'll let Mr. Graham share his screen and show the maps that pictorially demonstrate the impact of the initiative and the correlation with the zoning code being brought forward.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. Can you see the map?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
So the map in front of you, the area that's outlined in blue is the area of the initiative. And so Scott briefly touched on this. You see that it runs from Tidelands Park. It's the blue hatched area on the map. It runs up Embarcadero, and then up to the end of Embarcadero where it crosses the creek. And then it also Y's off on Coleman Drive out to the Rock parking lot area. So all that blue hatched area is the area where it covers the initiative. This map represents current zoning. So at the top of the map here, you'll see CVS / PD zoning. That's visitor serving commercial / planned development. This is the area where Morro Dunes RV Park is located, and it is accepted from the initiative in that it is an existing business related to RV camping. The area directly below that is zoned OA2 CFPD, and that's open space 2, commercial fishing planned development. That is the area where, adjacent to Morro Creek, the first set of camping spots are located. And again, it's allowed under the current code. As we sort of traverse down the Embarcadero and we get to the Triangle parking lot, which is kind of in this area, if you can see me circling it, zoning there is currently commercial visitor serving / with an S4 overlay related to design review. Camping is allowed in that location, and again, we have spots located there currently. And then you scroll further down, sort of to the bottom of the screen, you see again this green area underneath the hatched, and that's OA2, open space 2, planned development. And that is the location where the Tidelands camping spots are located. The area that you see kind of above here in the hatched area that doesn't have color underneath it, those are areas where under the current zoning camping is not allowed, and those are consistent of waterfront zoning and commercial fishing zoning. So this is the zoning. The current zoning is the zoning that we submitted the application to the Coastal Commission for the coastal development permit to make the program permanent. They are still processing that application now. And I'm going to transition over to the other map that shows what Scott was talking about, in that our future zoning, our draft zoning in Plan Morro Bay, again, same hatched location for the map, kind of zoomed in a little bit more. Our zoning does change in some of these areas. Camping is not allowed. So the first area that you see here is open space. This was OS2 in the existing zoning and changes just to open space. And in open space zoning, camping is not an allowed use in the draft zoning code. The area directly below it is parks and recreation. There's nothing located in this area, but that area does allow for camping under that zone. If you transition down to the sort of aqua colored area, that's commercial fishing. Camping is not allowed in that draft zoning classification. Traverse a little bit further down in this here, or this PF zoning here, is public facilities. That is the triangle lot, and that is where we currently have the temporary RV parking program, one of the locations for it. Public facilities doesn't allow for camping. Again, these are all the draft zoning classifications. Moving further south, or further down the map, we have waterfront zoning. Waterfront zoning, under the current zoning and proposed zoning, does not allow for RV camping. And then you get down to the bottom here, related to the spots that are in the Tidelands parking lot area. That area is again zoned to parks and recreation and does allow for RV parking, camping. So what you would take away from this is the top two areas no longer would allow for the camping program, and it would be limited to just this one area. Now, I'll back up again and say what I said when we looked at the other map, and that we submitted the application to the Coastal Commission under the current zoning. This is draft zoning, and these classifications were largely developed back in 2016 and 2017, and then presented to the Planning Commission in 2018. So they were well before we ever had a thought about doing the RV camping program. So if we were to move forward, and depending on what happens tonight, we would probably, before going forward for certification, make changes to the zoning code to accommodate the RV camping program, potentially. Again, sort of depending on the outcome tonight and or outcome of a future vote. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and continue on with the presentation from Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
All right. So yeah, thank you, Scott, for providing that context. So again, those were the main two areas of impact, again, on the revenue side, which could support both operations and capital needs of the harbor. And then the impact number two is primarily on the potential clashing or supporting of Plan Morro Bay and zoning code updates. The remaining 3 through 8 impacts, there were negligible to no impacts, so really not worth mentioning at this point in time. But again, the full report is attached to the staff report. Based on that, we don't have a concrete recommendation other than, council needs to sort of weigh through the three options at your disposal this evening. Excuse me. One would be to introduce ordinance number 648 for first reading by title only, with further reading waived. An ordinance of City Council of the City of Morro Bay, which would add Section D to Section 824.010, which would incorporate the very language that it was brought forward by the group of residents. You could also choose to adopt resolutions placing the proposed measure brought forward by the residents on the November 8th, 2022 ballot, or adopt resolution placing the proposed measure brought forward by the group of residents on the June 7th, 2022 ballot. So again, those are your three options: adopt an ordinance, bring it forward, place it on the ballot for November, or place it on the ballot for June of this year. City attorney's available, Dana's available from the clerk's office. I believe Eric is available from Harbor. Of course, you've already heard from myself and Scott Graham, and happy to answer any questions you may have as you wade through this discussion. And I'll stop sharing at this point, but we can always bring up those maps again if you need to look at them.
Thanks, Scott Collins and Scott Graham. I appreciate the overview again of what is being proposed and the options that we have to consider tonight. And the maps were very helpful, Mr. Graham. I appreciate you making those available. Pictures worth 1,000 words, obviously. And we're going to go ahead and go to questions, council questions on this. I'll just start. I have one specific question. It was proposed by, I believe, a couple of the commenters during previous public comment that perhaps the answer to meeting the capital needs for the harbor department, which were somewhere estimated to be $600,000 to $1 million a year in unfunded capital improvements on an annual basis, could be met through grants. And I would just like to get perhaps your perspective on that, Mr. Collins, and or perhaps Mr. Kwolek's perspective on that.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Heading, and it was a good question and a good thought from the community. I certainly think it's going to take more than one approach, and grants are definitely part of the mix and has been in discussion with the Harbor Advisory Board and of course with Eric Endersby at the helm for the Harbor Department in pursuing grant opportunities. We've been successful through the federal appropriations process to get funding for the dredging, annual dredging, and then the more extensive dredging every 5 to 7 years of our harbor. But that's not necessarily a grant that comes through the appropriations, and that doesn't provide any funding for the capital needs, which include our T-piers, our boat slips, revetment in certain areas, the harbor walk itself, the roads, the lighting. And I'm assuming there's a lot other things like our boat launch ramp, which could quickly add up. And we certainly see the value in applying for grants when they become available, but that's not a steady, reliant revenue stream that would address all of our needs. It would be something that's a one-off project that we could potentially get partial funding for. For instance, we tried to get funding through the earmark process, the federal budget last year, submitted for a $4 million appropriation, and through that process is whittled down to $200,000 that was supported by the U.S. Senator representing California, Padilla. Which, can initiate a study, but that's certainly not going to reconstruct the North T-pier, which we were hoping. So yeah, it's a worthy endeavor, but it's just one of many that would need to be pursued to help alleviate that, as you mentioned, about $600,000 to $800,000 a year investment above and beyond our existing revenue that's available for the harbor fund. And Eric, any other thoughts on grants or revenue streams?
Well, there's, the grant program that we ally ourselves to pretty heavily is through California Department of Boating and Waterways, and really the only grant program that would fit any of our infrastructure is the launch ramp program. Everything else is a loan program for, South T-pier had a loan from DBW, as did some of our slips, but that's lending, it's a different animal.
Good, thank you. That was just my only question. I'll open it up to the rest of council to see if you have any questions of staff regarding the staff report. Okay, seeing no hands. All right, then I will go ahead and open up public comment. This is public comment for item C-1 on our agenda. Public comment is now open.
Mayor, I'm sorry, I didn't get my hand up fast.
Oh, I didn't see your hand. I'm sorry. Well, hold on for public comment 1 second.
Thank you.
Councilmember Heller, please, questions.
A little slow in getting that hand up there. Appreciate that. So with respect to zoning, just so that I'm clear and the people listening in are clear, the current zoning only allows the RV camping in one location at this point, but the proposed zoning, the proposed zoning would only allow it in one of the 3 locations. But the council could, if we wanted to, change that as that zoning comes forward, so that we could have RV parking in these locations as well as others. Is that correct, Scott Graham and Collins?
Yes, Councilmember Heller, that's correct. The idea would be, as we move forward, depending on the outcome of this evening and where we go from here, we would probably make clarifications and revisions to the draft zoning code to reflect the program that we have in place now moving forward, and again, the application that we have sitting in front of the Coastal Commission currently.
Okay, and then I've gotten a lot of questions from community members regarding the permit. So we're operating on a temporary permit now, and we're in the process of getting a permanent permit from the Coastal Commission. Does the impact of what would the impact be, if any, with the council's action tonight on this? For example, if we were to put it on the June ballot, Would you continue to process the permanent permit, or what are your thoughts about that?
I did have a conversation with the Coastal Commission on this issue about a week ago, 2 weeks ago now, actually. They're paying attention. They know that this is happening, and so they're paying attention to the process that we're following. They would probably stop processing the application if we were to put it to a vote in June. If it were going to be longer than that, it wouldn't meet their statutory requirements for processing the application, like meaning if we waited till November. So they would probably have to continue processing our application. But we would have to get it complete, before that time frame for them to approve it. And then again, the vote could just simply overturn it. So.
Great. Thank you for that, Scott. That helps a lot. Mr. Endersby, so you're kind of in the middle of you're in the fishbowl at this point. Have you received complaints at any of the locations, and can you tell me about the complaints, and is there a popular or least popular location with respect to complaints from residents?
Sure, Councilmember Heller. So, obviously the most of the complaints we've had since the inception were about the Coleman site, which we've dealt with and pulled away from that. From the public now, I think most of the comments we hear, negative comments we hear, are primarily what you hear at the council meetings when we brought it to the council. We don't often get people calling the office or coming by and complaining or giving us negative comments. We do get some user comments that come through the users themselves that have rented, and some of those folks have some negative comments, mostly along the lines of how to make it work better for them, what they'd like to see in the program, rather than negative comments against the program itself. And we receive positive comments as well. But from the general public, the general community public, we don't generally see or hear a lot, directly in our office or on phone calls or emails. It really centers around these council meetings. When we brought it last year, that's when all the public comments start coming in.
Okay, and then you estimate that over a calendar year, your department netted $134,000. What have you used these funds for?
They're not earmarked for anything in particular. They just go into our harbor fund, and our harbor's general fund, so to speak. But yeah, that's the net after paying TOT and the county tax, and our obligations to pay some percent on the booking organization, basically a percent of the credit card fees.
So if you got this amount of money year after year, what do you think you would use the funds for?
Well, it just goes into our general funding for the harbor department. 135,000 is about a position, an administrative position. When we get our funding, from our leases, from our slips, they never go to any particular place. They just go into a larger fund that we line item out. So it would just go toward all of our operations and programming that we currently have underway now.
Okay. Do you need another administrative position filled?
Well, that's a whole nother question. 7 or 8 years ago, we had 8 positions in this department. We're now down to 6. Through a number of things that I won't spend 15 minutes explaining, part of it was the economy, part of it was COVID. Through attrition, we've whittled down to 6 positions. And as you know, the last council meeting, mid-year budget, we approved a organizational assessment by the Center for Organizational Effectiveness to look at just that and see what our department structure should be. But as it stands right now, we are very strapped with keeping up with all of our obligations that we have to do right now with our existing 6 full-time personnel. It's very challenging, to say the least.
Okay. Is there a minimum number of sites that would make the program worth the effort from your perspective? For example, if just the 9 sites at Morro Creek remained and the others are removed, would it make sense for you to administer the program?
Well, we have 19 sites total right now. I think there's 9 out at the creek, so that's not quite half. So it would cut those revenues about in half. At some point, there's going to be a tipping point where, I'll use one of my what the city manager calls my Ericisms. At some point, the juice won't be worth the squeeze anymore. What that point is,
one of my favorites.
if you cut the 135,000, if that ends up being what it would end up sort of being in the long run, 120, 130,000, you're now down to 60. That's probably worth it, but it's starting to border on, maybe not.
Okay. Are there, since we've started this program, have any other locations come to mind where RV camping might work, you think?
No, I think we vetted, between Coleman and we looked at the Rock a couple of different times. Over the 2 years we've looked at this. We looked at the launch ramp parking lot. There's really no other real estate, available on the waterfront. That's pretty much it, unless we were to go into the Front Street parking lot, which interestingly, we looked at that back in the early 2000s for camping, RV camping, or the lot, below the old D'Estacio's, the city parking lot next to Centennial, which I'm sure is a non-starter for a whole bunch of different reasons. But now there's really no more real estate. We kind of looked at everything so far, I think.
Okay. And then Chief Cox, are you on board here tonight? I don't know if Chief Cox is here or not. I was just curious about how many complaints he may have received.
Sorry, Councilmember Heller. Yes, I am.
That's okay. Sorry to bother you with this one question, but over the last year or so, have you got many complaints regarding the RV parking spaces? And if so, where did they come from and what were the complaints?
Great question. The only complaint that I recall, and I discussed this with our patrol staff, was we had a generator complaint from the Tidelands area. And when we responded out there to that, the folks just were not aware of what the hours that they were supposed to be allowed to use a generator at that location. But once that was explained, we didn't have any issues with them turning the generator off and complying, and we haven't had any other problematic issues or concerns that have been addressed through the police department anyway.
Okay, that's what I need. Thank you very much for that. Let's see here. Those are my questions. Thank you. Thank you, Chief Cox, and thank you, Eric. And
Thanks,
Scott
Councilmember
Graham.
Miller. Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Councilmember Ford.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a question for Mr. Endersby. How many hours do you think are taken to basically manage the RV parking? How much staffing does it take to take care of that?
Sure, go ahead and answer. Great question. So administratively, it's probably a couple hours a week to do the accounts receivable end of it and manage the bookings. Whether that's our business coordinator or our patrol staff, they kind of share in that. So that's a couple, 2-3 hours a week. On a daily basis, patrol's responsible for looking at the bookings, seeing who's coming in on any given day, kind of write down who they are and get their information. And then we'll go check them in. We'll go out to the site at some point. Check-in time, I think, is after 2 o'clock. So we'll go in sometime after 3, 4 in the afternoon and make the rounds. And it's probably, again, another, on a daily basis, depending on how many numbers we have. Of course, the more bookings you get, the longer it takes to work through. Obviously on a day that's got 19, which we've had some of those on several weekends during the summer, it takes a while to work through there. But on average, on your average day like now, with maybe we got 3 or 4 bookings, it's probably half hour, 40 minutes. On a full 19 space weekend, you're probably looking at a couple hours to get through them all. So on average, probably an hour a day, maybe an hour and a half.
Okay, that's the only question I have. Thank you.
And then that's outside dealing with any major problems, with, like the Chief Cox said, every once in a while we get generator noise or some other complaints. That's just the routine day-to-day, keep the program going, kind of time commitment.
Since you brought up the generators, Mr. Endersby, can you explain, just in your experience, how many of these RVs are using generators on a regular basis there, on the harbor? Is it common?
For the larger RVs, pretty much all of them have them. They're all pretty well contained. They're all relatively quiet. You find every once in a while you find an older RV that just has an older generator that's noisier or maybe not as well contained. But you know, a lot more people these days that are doing the whole van life thing, and they're all self-contained and they've got solar panels and don't do generators at all. So it's an interesting mix. But a good amount of them have them. But they're generally the RV folks are so used to RV parks and knowing that there's quiet time and there's hours. It's the rare person that doesn't get that and ends up leaving a generator and going later at night.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ford. Any other questions? And thanks, Eric, again for your answering all those questions. I appreciate it. Okay, seeing no further questions, I'll go ahead and open up public comment. This is public comment for item C-1 on the agenda this evening. Public comment is now open. And let's see, Highland, do we have any public comment, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First up, we have a raised hand from Betty Winholtz.
Okay, welcome, Betty.
Hi, it's Betty Winholtz again. As one of the original proponents of the measure, I just want to encourage you to put this on the June ballot so we can have a decision sooner rather than later. I think a lot of the comments have been brought out tonight, a month ago, and as we've gone door to door and readily got signatures from voters, I think that the community is ready to make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Next public comment, Highland.
All right, next up we have Don Betty.
Okay, welcome, Don.
Thank you. This question probably should have been asked a long time before now, but I want to throw it out there. Well, again, I've wondered for some time how the financials were initially set up when these lease sites were established. That's all.
Thanks, Don. Next public comment, Highland.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are no more raised hands in the queue.
All right. I'll close public comment, bring it back, and maybe just ask Mr. Endersby just very quickly, do you have a response to the basic question of how the finances were set up, perhaps establishing the rates and
So sure, Mayor Henning. So the rates were, we looked at other dry camping in the city to make sure that we weren't competing directly with them and undercutting them. And so primarily that was state parks and Morro Dunes right across on the other side of the creek over there. And so we just set the rate a little bit higher than where they were to make sure we weren't competing and kind of realizing we need to charge a market rate of some sort. And so that's where our numbers came from. And then for our premium sites, quote unquote, which were originally Coleman and then Tidelands, once we set that up, we set them at 75 a night. And then for the non-premium ones, we set them at 65. So we just made a little higher cost to go to the front row seat, so to speak.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate that. So we're back to council looking for some comments and or direction on which way you want to head. Perhaps I can begin. I probably waxed eloquently last time we had this presentation looking at the same issues, and my speech is not much different at this time. First, I think council, and I'll just speak for myself, was somewhat ambivalent about this program to begin with, given some of the concerns, and thusly we made it a pilot project to look at and have it brought back to us. Pulled it back a bit because of one very unpopular site, and then continued the pilot, looking at the possibility of making it permanent. The real issue that generates this came out of a recommendation from the Harbor Advisory Board as they looked at revenue needs for the Harbor Department, especially capital needs in the future. And I really appreciated the Harbor Advisory Board's work on this, making that recommendation. Mr. Endersby and his staff did an extensive evaluation of what the potentials were, realizing that ladies and gentlemen, the real issue at hand is that of our 4 funds, the general fund, the water fund, the sewer fund, and the harbor fund, we've got 3 fairly healthy funds, the sewer, the water, and the general fund, but the harbor fund is sick. And it is in dire straits, in my opinion, with regard to not only the operational needs to increase potentially staffing and the operations there, but mainly unmet capital needs. And Mr. Endersby did a presentation, I believe, a couple of meetings ago on the overall capital needs for the harbor department that went unfunded, and they range on an annual basis between $600,000 and $800,000 to $800,000 to $1 million a year in potential capital improvements, and we have literally no capital dollars saved to be able to meet those needs. And that's a huge concern for the city. It should be a concern for everybody here. And so, we have embarked on looking at, in my opinion, a number of different opportunities to improve revenues in the harbor department. I will tell you, over the last 10 years, if you look at our annual report, that harbor revenues, the total revenues for the harbor department have increased 0.4% in 10 years. In other words, they've been flat. Expenses have only increased 4%. And that means that I think Mr. Endersby and his staff have done a tremendous job of managing the operation on the funds that they had. The operation, given the fact that revenues come primarily from leases, will never be able to generate enough money to fund a capital budget. And unfortunately, we cannot legally borrow money from the general fund, the sewer fund, or the water fund, or I should say transfer money into the harbor fund to fix the problem. And that's the dilemma or the conundrum that we have this evening. My comments last time were also one that I'm very proud of our community. I think it's very representative of a democracy to go out and garner the number of signatures that the individuals that have brought this initiative forward that's being proposed tonight. I do commend them. It takes a lot of work to do that. It's democracy in action. And I'm proud of that effort, as I mentioned previously during my comments. But the dilemma for me remains, and that is, how do you solve the problem of literally a under or zero funded capital needs harbor fund that in years to come is going to crumble, and we're going to be hit with huge dollars suddenly to try to meet the capital needs in the future. I am personally going to support item 1 on the staff recommendation. I don't think it behooves us personally taking the time to send this to the voters. I know that the number of ballots or the number of signatures collected does not represent the full contingent of voters in the city. But at this time, it just seems to me that this will continue to be unpopular, may have zoning issues in the future, and that we need to really garner all of the resources that we can, including the group that has brought this forward, to assist us in trying to determine how to get a sustainable revenue stream into the harbor department to meet the future needs. Grants will not do it. They may be a piece of it, but we're not going to be able to get $600,000 to $800,000 a year, in my opinion, of grants to shore up the harbor department. So for all of those reasons, I want to commend staff for putting the program together, commend the Harbor Advisory Board for recommending it, commend this council for giving it a chance and allowing it to happen. It does eliminate a significant number of dollars of revenue for future capital needs. However, I just think we have to put boots in the saddle, or boots on the ground, or whatever the saying is, and figure this out from a financial standpoint. And I'm calling those folks that are involved in this initiative and everybody that signed it to come forward and assist us with the energy that you have to try to solve this problem, because obviously this is not quite the most popular way to address the issue that's before us tonight. So for that reason, I'll be supporting staff recommendation number 1. That's my summary, and I'll take other comments.
I'll second. I don't know if you're making a motion.
I'll make that
just
motion,
supporting
sure,
it.
and then we can have further discussion. So
If you're
motion
making
by,
that motion, I will support that motion, and I will concur with your comments and just add my appreciation for staff, but also for my colleagues on council who really took a risk to try something, because the harbor is incredibly important to Morro Bay. It's one of our largest assets, and I think it's important for council to take a risk, but I also think it's important for us to listen to the people of Morro Bay who elected us, and they've spoken clearly across time. The message has been very, very clear, and so I think it's important that we have that flexibility as well. I know this took considerable amount of staff time to put together. The fact that we got a little bit of money from it, a little bit of revenue from it, I consider a win, but I also think it's time to continue to look at other ideas. And I want to join your call to folks to, help council, help staff, help one another be creative and find those funding mechanisms that are going to be meaningful and are going to last over time and be dependable.
thank you, Councilmember Addis. Motion by Mayor Heading for staff recommendation number 1, that we adopt the ordinance without alteration by introducing for first reading by title only with further reading waived, ordinance number 648, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Morro Bay, California, adding subsection D to section 8.24.010, prohibited at certain times and in certain places of chapter 8.24 camping of Title B, Health and Safety of the Morro Bay Municipal Code. Seconded by Councilmember Addis and Councilmember Heller. I see your hand, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. This is I echo everyone's comments for the most part. This was, the council stepped up at a very difficult time for our harbor department, which is easy to forget. It's part of the first responders team, which is so important to the city and to everyone who lives here. And I'm proud of our unanimous decision to adopt this program and to give it a try, and all the work that Scott Graham and Scott Collins did to push this through and get it approved quickly, all the work that Eric Endersby has done to operationally put together a website and oversee it. I am, like you, Mayor, I am very concerned about the financial condition of this department, which is lagging severely in having sufficient capital funds to make improvements to infrastructure, much of which was built in World War II and is currently failing us. And if you go on the harbor walk at any location, starting from the loading dock out to the rock, all you have to do is look over the edge of those boulders and see how it's eroded and how it's undermined. I personally do not support option number 1. I think I have a lot of respect for the people who got the petition, the signatures together, some meaningful output. It's very easy to be against something, and it's very easy to be against this. But frankly, I think until we have a funding source, a sustainable funding source in place that will support this harbor department to take care of capital needs, that this operation should remain in place, with the exception of one location where I have heard most of the complaints, which is the Triangle Parking Lot Group. That location has not worked well for the Maritime Museum. They have a long, steady number of complaints, and I've talked to them multiple times. I personally live near the Tidelands Park location. I have no problem with it. There have been no complaints from 456 Embarcadero, the lodging next door. There have been no complaints from neighbors regarding noise or anything else. I think we should charge more for those locations and keep them in place. And I think the Morro Creek locations really are not bothering anybody, and we should keep those in place. But I would like to alter this ordinance, eliminate the museum, the Triangle Parking Lot locations from it, and put it on the ballot in June.
Thank you, Councilmember Heller. Any further comments? Okay, hearing none, I'll go ahead and ask the clerk to take a roll call vote, please. Oh, you're muted, Dana.
Councilmember Addis,
Yes.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Councilmember Heller,
No.
Councilmember Barton,
Yes.
Mayor Heading.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Thank you for all your work, staff. Dana, I don't want to forget you. It was a heroic effort to certify this. You've been given accolades from those individuals that went through the process of gathering the signatures. I want to thank you and Heather and any of your staff members that were involved in this. Excellent job. Everything was done with perfection and in a timely fashion and with grace. So thank you for that. All right, that brings us to item, let's see where we are, folks. C-2. This is presentation and discussion of the fiscal year 2020-2021 annual comprehensive financial report. That would be now the ACFR, if I got to remember that and say that correctly from here on out. And I believe for introduction purposes and maybe summary, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Johnson Rios. Sarah, welcome.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and council members. And yes, I'll provide a brief introduction, and then our auditor, Lindsay Zimmerman, who just appeared on your screen, will handle the bulk of the presentation, but I do want to set the stage from management's standpoint. So I will share a few slides. All right. So as I mentioned, you'll hear from Lindsay in just a moment. I did want to highlight some things that are new this year, and Mayor Heading, you highlighted one of them, which is the new name, same report. So the GFOA has recommended that this report be referred to as the ACFR rather than the former acronym, which is similar to an offensive term in South Africa, is my understanding. So consistent with that guidance from GFOA, this is now the ACFR, the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. And more significantly this year, we have some other new things as well. As you know, we have a new staff team that has completed this year's year-end process. And you'll hear a little bit more later about how the timing of that transition proved a bit challenging this year for year-end, but we have a highly qualified staff team that is on board and eager and excited to continue providing effective financial management for Morro Bay going forward. And we do also have a new auditor this year. So lots of changes at the same time in this year-end process. As you know, the city had completed its 5 years with the prior auditor, the Poon Group, and this spring, prior to my coming on board and the new staff team coming on board, had completed an RFP process. City selected Brown Armstrong, and you will meet one of their partners, Lindsay Zimmerman, momentarily. And we have a 5-year contract with Brown Armstrong, so we look forward to working with them in the years ahead. And then finally, we have a new major fund this year. The GASB has guidelines about percentages of total revenues and expenditures and assets and liabilities that constitute a major fund. And for the first time in fiscal year 2021, the Measure Q&E fund just barely inched above those thresholds. And so it's now pulled out in the ACFR as a major fund and will almost definitely be pulled out in future years because of the anticipated increased revenue from Measure E. So that actually allows for increased clarity for that fund specifically in some of the reports, because it used to be grouped with non-major governmental funds. Let's see. And then the next couple of slides, I just wanted to remind you, you heard a lot of this from me at the mid-year and fiscal forecast report, so I'm not going to go into great detail on the numbers, and Ms. Zimmerman will give you some of the highlight numbers from the report. But just big picture, this is really a good story this year in terms of the fiscal position of the city. The city's net position overall improved by around $15 million this year. As you know, the city experienced rapid recovery from the preliminary setback of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that's reflected in the year-end numbers for 2021. And then, of course, we had the passage of Measure E, the additional 1% sales tax in November 2020, and started to collect revenues in April 2021. And so that really helps put the city on a much improved fiscal sustainability path going forward. So those were the major good pieces of good news, big picture. Specifically, I did want to highlight one chart that won't be in the auditor's slides, because I know this was of interest to CFAC and others last year. And it's the breakdown of the unassigned fund balance in the general fund specifically. So some of these numbers will look familiar to you as well from the mid-year and report a few weeks ago. The operating fund has a unassigned fund balance of 2.9 million. That's based largely on operating surplus from fiscal year 2021. So revenues over expenditures for that year. And then the emergency reserve ended the year with a $2.4 million surplus, fund balance. And then the smaller numbers you see below are based on previous council direction to transfer funds to set aside for capital projects and vehicle replacement. So that's a total of over $6 million of general fund balance. And as we proceed this spring, we'll be looking at the general fund emergency reserve policy in concert with the pension reserve policy, and we may be seeking your direction to transfer funds from one place to another. But overall, I wanted you to have this breakdown of where we were at on June 30th. And then I know our long-term liabilities, as I just mentioned, is one of council's goals to address as part of the fiscal sustainability goal. The pension liability did increase somewhat in 2021, despite the city making minimum payments. And that has been the trend, in part because of the discount rate changes that CalPERS has made, in part because we're part of a risk pool with other cities, and so they're evaluating a number of different moving factors at the same time. And we are looking for ways to do more than make minimum payments to continue to address that, as you know. On a more positive note, the OPEB liability decreased by $4 million since we were able to appropriately recognize the city's OPEB trust this year. And so that is reflected in those numbers. So net, we actually had an improvement in the long-term pension and OPEB liability change this last fiscal year. And then Lindsay will go into this in a lot more detail, but I did want to touch on management's views of the audit results. We did have an unmodified or clean audit. We also had one finding this year, and in talking amongst management and the auditors, the primary contributing factor was really significant staff turnover right around the year-end time period. So as you know, the director position, my position, turned over. I'm really excited to be on board. The timing of that was right at the end of June. So I came on board and then was able to hire a finance manager in September and our senior accountant in December. So all of that was during the fiscal year end period. And we had 2 interims in the director and manager position before us. So everyone was doing their best to keep the ball rolling, but it did result in some delays and in some gaps perhaps in the transition of knowledge. And so we really find this finding to be anomalous this year. You will see in the attachment that's linked in your staff report a very detailed response from us on how we will address it going forward. And I just wanted to touch on a few of those things for you tonight. First, I do want to reiterate my gratitude for our very effective and competent finance manager, Emily Conrad, who really picked this audit up and the year-end process up and took it on when she started in September. We had started what we could before she arrived, and she had a lot of catching up that she helped the city to do. And so we have a great team of folks with dozens of years of public sector financial management between us that's on board and ready to continue working going forward. As you know, we have had ongoing conversations about the level of finance staffing resources, which has been one of the kind of common themes in prior year audit findings as well. And so while prior staff teams have done a lot to really address fiscal policies, get council approved financial policies, et cetera, this question about staffing turnover and staffing resources is one that we're still wanting to look at going forward. You recently approved the restoration of the last finance position at mid-year. So we've actually got that recruitment out on the streets now. We're really excited about that, and we'll continue to assess from there. In addition, we feel that there are some other specific improvements that we want to make to some of our internal documentation to ensure that if we have significant staffing turnover going forward, that the city is in a better position with all of the detailed internal documentation to weather that. Council's done an excellent job with prior staff teams in adopting all of the framing policies, and those are still valid and strong, and we will continue to use those and modify those as needed going forward. And then finally, one of the things that got reduced during COVID-19, unfortunately, citywide, was some of the training budget. And so we're going to be looking at that again in 22-23 and ensuring not only that we appropriately budget for that, but that we carve out staff time for that. It's really important, and specifically, any GASB updates and things like that, that we prioritize continuing education. So that's going to be a focal point. And then, as I mentioned, just continuing to monitor the level of staffing resources to keep pace with really some of the increasing complexities for Morro Bay's fiscal management, primarily the WRF project and the WIFIA and SRF required reporting, ARPA funds and that reporting, additional revenues coming in through Measure E, which we hope to be able to put to use for additional capital work, among other things. So we're just, it's all good stuff. It's all great resources that have been coming the city's way. We just need to make sure that we're adequately resourced to effectively continue to manage that going forward. And the last thing I wanted to note is to thank CFAC for their informal review of this document tonight. We had hoped to have a joint meeting today, and that didn't work out in terms of folks' availability. But we did get them the report and ask for them to participate tonight if they were available. So we may have some of them calling in. And I just wanted to thank them for their patience with the timing of this year and their availability to review as needed. And with that, I want to take this down and turn it over to Lindsay Zimmerman, one of the partners with Brown Armstrong.
Welcome, Lindsay.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mary, Mayor, City Council members. Just wanted to say thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule for me to present these audit results to you. And first of all, just want to say thank you so much to the staff. It was it's always fun in the first year audit, but when you come in and don't have a lot of the prior knowledge of what the old staff were doing and the processes and what we needed and all that, they really stepped it up. Sarah's group, Emily, did a fantastic job. And so we worked through everything to make sure that we have, we're able to present this ACFR now, that we call it ACFR, with the right proper numbers and the right proper presentation. So just want to start off by saying that. And then with that, I'll share my screen. Okay, and then so I'll just go down. So I just want to say thanks again, everyone, for allowing me to present these audit results. In terms of the agenda, I'll go over the scope of the services that our team was able to provide. I will go over the audit purpose, responsibilities, and the timelines. I will go over the audit areas of focus that we tended to focus on this year, especially with a first-year audit. I'll briefly go over the annual comprehensive financial report, or ACFR overview, for anyone that is not familiar with that presentation. I'll touch on some of the financial highlights of the ACFR, and then I will go over the results of the audit. First of all, our scope of services is we are to perform an audit of the city's financial statements in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America, and standards applicable to GAS, or Government Auditing Standards, as issued by the Comptroller General of the United States. Two other items of communication that I will touch on at the end of my report are the required communication at the conclusion of the audit, and the report, or I call that the SAS 114 letter. And then we also, in addition to the audit of the dollar amounts and balances and notes and whatnot, we also look at the internal controls over the financial reporting and on compliance and other matters in accordance with GAS, or those governmental auditing standards. And that's what what we call the SAS 115 letter. In addition to the scope of our services, we perform audits on the TDA funds. So we perform and do detailed testing and confirmation for the Transit Enterprise Fund, the Local Transportation Fund for roads, and then also the Local Transportation Fund for the bike path for the non-transit. And for the single audit, we have the same grant that was performed last year, which is the Water Infrastructure and Innovation Act Credit Agreement, or WIFIA. And so both of those have a due date now of March 31st. And so we are working through those, and we will for sure be completing those before the March 31st deadline. And as of right now, as part of my presentation, we do not anticipate any issues with either one of these areas of the audit. And then just a brief background on the audit purpose. The audit is to provide an independent, objective assessment of the stewardship of the governmental funds. We are to be independent and carefully examine and audit the books, records, accounts, and funds. And the audit is essential for government accountability to the public. And so one other thing that I was going to mention too is that, just to reiterate, that as auditors, we can't look at every single detail. And so we provide reasonable assurance that the ACFR is presented within a material reasonableness, and it's not an absolute assurance. And then just to touch on the separation between management's responsibility and our responsibility as the auditor. Management is actually responsible for the financial statements. So they have to make sure that they are presented properly in accordance with their underlying books and information. They also have to make sure that they are presented in accordance with those accounting principles generally accepted in the US of A. One thing too is, and we work together, is with the adoption of the proper accounting policies in terms of with the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, GASB. We did have a new one this year, which is GASB 84, which deals with fiduciary activities. And so we worked through that to make sure that that was presented properly this year. And then this was the big one that Sarah kind of touched on earlier, is that it is management's responsibility to establish and maintain the effectiveness of the internal controls over financial reporting and compliance. And also a key one for management is to prevent and be able to detect fraud. So from the auditor's responsibility, which I touched on earlier, perform the audit in accordance with those professional standards. Then also what I'm doing here today is communicating to those charged with governance, which says City Council. So we take what's called a risk-based approach. And so we assess our audit risk over internal controls and perform a risk base over the areas of concern as we perform several city audits and other municipalities. And then we determined that the fairness of the presentation of the financials as a whole. So when I go over the areas of the ACFR, I will touch on what we focus more on, and then what we make sure that the rest of the report as a whole is interconnected with the basic financials and whatnot. And then what I'm doing here today and presenting to you is the issue those opinions, and that 2-page report for the opinion. All that work goes into that, and it's great. And so just presenting that and the required communication letters I touched on earlier. And then for the audit timeline and critical dates, this year was a little bit more unusual. I think next year is going to go a lot smoother and a lot more time to prep. But we were able to come out to Morro Bay, to the city, and perform some on-site tests of controls. We performed some walkthroughs in key audit areas. We did perform some interviews with management and staff, what we call SAS 99 interviews, to make sure that there's any areas of concerns that they had. And that was one area that Sarah had touched on earlier, is just that with that staffing turnover, there might have been some areas that that knowledge transfer might not have come over properly. So we did look at that, and then we looked at minutes and agreements, that sort of thing. Then we were able to substantiate all of the year-end balances, and throughout the months of January and February, we performed confirmation processes where we confirmed a lot of the revenue type balances, cash balances, all of the new debt, the notes payable. So that was a great process there, and making sure that we were able to substantiate a lot of those balances. Then we were able to review and draft the reports in February and March, and issued our report on March 2nd. A couple of the audit areas of focus, what we've come to realize with a lot of city risks and a lot of other areas of concern is a revenue recognition. So we performed a detailed testing of controls over cash receipts, and those areas of concern was across all of the different types of funds. So the enterprise, the governmental, all that. So then we also performed what's called Substantive Analytics to make sure that instead of just the detailed testing, that the balances, especially for areas with the enterprise funds, water, sewer, harbor, that they were presented properly as a whole rather than just individual type areas. Then we also looked at management's override of controls. So we did detailed testing on journal entries, making sure that those were properly documented and reviewed. I talked about this earlier about inquiring with individuals in the financial reporting process. And then touched on this earlier, is performing those walkthroughs of significant audit areas to make sure there was enough segregation of duties. And then just to briefly touch on the ACFR report as a whole, it's basically broken down into 3 major sections. The introductory section, the main key highlight there is the letter of transmittal that is prepared by the city manager and Sarah, and they present, they utilize a source for to familiarize the readers of the city and what forms and services and the economic condition of the city and whatnot. So it's a great intro to the ACFR as a whole. Then the meat of the report is the independent auditor's report, which is my big one that I make sure that we have, what we talked about earlier, is that clean opinion. And it just goes into detail on our responsibilities and management's responsibilities, and that we state that the ACFR as a whole is presented properly. The management's discussion and analysis is also drafted by management in detail, and this is a great look into the financial wellness of the city as a whole from year over year. So it takes the report as of activity as of June 30, 2021, and compares it to the year prior, so June 30, 2020. Then the financial statements as a whole, we have the government-wide financials. That is based on full accrual. So you've got your long-term assets, long-term liabilities, and that's a full better picture with the GASB 34 conversion of the city's point in time and for the year activity as of June 30, 2021. Then we have the governmental funds, the proprietary funds, which is the enterprise and the internal service funds. And then we also have a fiduciary fund left after the implementation of a GASB 84. And then the notes are a great support to support all of those basic financial statements. So each of the major areas has its own notes that ties up to the financials and provides more detail. And then we have some required supplementary information that's detailed for budget, pension, and OPEB type areas. And then the supplementary information is all of the non-major type area consolidating information. So you can go back there and look at any individual funds and how it did against the budget and whatnot there. And then the statistical section is it's a great analysis of the city. It goes over in depth a lot of the different statistical analysis that is interesting to look at. And then for a snapshot on the government-wide analysis, the total assets and deferred outflows of resources and for as a whole for governmental and business type did increase. We had the major areas that helped that are the what we talked about earlier is that the passage of that Measure E that was effective in April 2021 that really increased and created that new major fund. So you can see that, I'll touch on that later. We had a significant increase in capital asset construction in progress related to the wharf project, and also that increase in cash based on the surcharges of that project, and the liabilities also did increase, but that was a direct correlation with that drawdown of those notes. So just wanted to touch on those kind of high level areas, just saying that the financial position is in a great position. And then just touch on the statement of activities for the government-wide, you'll notice the net increase in net position of $14 million. So great increase there. Nothing else really to touch on. Mainly it was increasing in the sales tax from Measure E, cannabis city tax, we talked about that earlier, in the management discussion analysis, and then also an increase in the transient occupancy tax. That was another large increase based on the recovery from COVID-19. And then just to touch on a little bit of the governmental fund analysis, I just showed the breakdown. We now have that new major fund, the district transaction tax. It doesn't, and these are all in millions. I think I forgot to mention that earlier, but it's a great snapshot of the wellness of the general fund, which Sarah touched on. You'll see that unassigned balance of $6.3 million. So that is fantastic. The increase overall of the net change in fund balance was $3 million for the general fund as a result of the increase in taxes and transient occupancy tax and whatnot. So just wanted to touch on a couple of highlights there. And then Sarah went into detail a little bit more on this, so I'll just basically touch on it slightly. The net pension liabilities, you'll see that CalPERS kept the discount rate the same, but there was still an increase of about 1.8 million. That even with the market increasing, it's just hard to keep up with that. So we continue to monitor and we look at that in detail of the actuarial inputs to make sure those inputs appear reasonable and are accurate. And then same thing that Sarah touched on earlier with the net OPEB liability, that's down to 1.2 million. So that's going great. The discount rate did change there to 5.4% from 2.2%. And that the major increase, a decrease there is we were able to, with GASB 84 and an analysis of more in depth with different eyes looking at the OPEB trust, that originally should have been allocated against the OPEB liability. So we were able to get with the actuary, get a new report, and have a better representation of that actual liability, since you do have those trust funds that are allocated directly to pay off that liability. So that was great. And then just to touch on the wharf project, the major areas that it impacted this year is that construction in progress and that capital assets, which I touched on. And so you'll see that is a $41 million increase in that project. So great project there. And then you'll see that drawdown of the notes payable. So that was about $32 million for obviously some of the areas that have already been incurred. So being able to utilize that funding to continue that project. And then for the results of the audit, happy to report that we do have an unmodified or clean opinion. So far, we don't anticipate any non-compliance issues. And there was that one material weakness that Sarah had mentioned. And just to basically just go in a little bit more detail, there was, I think, just some, like what we talked about with, it's an anomaly. It's a weird year with all the changeover with management, hands passing, touching certain areas, and not having that secondary review. The implementation of the drawdowns of the loans were kind of one of the major areas of where a lot of this financial reporting weakness came about. Emily and I went into a lot of detail to make sure that we got the numbers right and they are presented properly. So just kind of back and forth, working together and just making sure that they were presented properly with the timing of the drawdowns, and just making sure that they were properly reported in the financials, as these funds are recorded with the water and sewer, which is an enterprise, which they are enterprise funds. And so since they're on full accrual, they have to record the liability and the drawdown of the loans with the cash. So it's, we worked through it, we got through it. And so happy to report the financials are presented properly. And I do believe that this is an anomaly, a one-time area that it just impacted a lot of accounts. And so we just worked through that. And the documentation, and I do believe that with working with management, that the council has done a great job of coming around from a few years back and making sure that the processes are in place. But now it's just going to be a time of enforcing those policies that you have in place. And so just wanted to touch on that. I think next year is going to be a lot smoother and everything's going to work out great. And we have great communication back and forth. If they have any questions, even throughout the year, I'm always available for them to help them and make sure that we implement everything properly. And then for the SAS 114 portion of the other required communication, we have that new GASB statement that was adopted, GASB 84, fiduciary activities where we had moved some funds that, like the OPEB trust, got consolidated in with the liability. We had one fund left that still was acting as an agent, and it was recorded now as a custodial fund instead of an agency fund. And then there were some of the fiduciary activities that were actually related to governmental activities. So that got consolidated into the general fund there. And I touched on some of these earlier, the net OPEB liability and pension liabilities. We made sure that we ticked and tied and looked at all of the actuary assumptions there for the significant estimates, made sure the notes were properly supported. We also looked at the capital assets and the depreciation useful lives and the recalculations of those, that depreciation expense. And we also looked at the allowance for doubtful accounts, since that is also an estimate, to make sure that that was properly presented in the ACFR. Happy to report we did not have any difficulties in performing the audit, rather than just that first year and getting to know each other in the processes and just that knowledge transfer with the staff turnover. We did have some corrected misstatements that is attached in one of your attachments. That's called the SAS 114 letter. We didn't have any disagreements with management, so that was great. They were very willing and helpful and worked together to make sure that we got everything presented properly. And the management did sign a management representation letter that states the financials are their responsibility, and us as independent auditors come in and issue a separate audit report on the financials. And then I touched on the material weakness, but I didn't have any other findings. So with that, I'd like to turn it over for any questions.
Thank you, Lindsay. As always, I appreciate a comprehensive audit review, and yours was very comprehensive. Thank you for the detailed discussion regarding the management finding or the management letter issue regarding the issue of staff turnover. And I think you and Sarah explained that in great detail. As councils or boards, we're always concerned about those kinds of findings. However, I believe we fully understand what the issue was. We were in a transitional period, and so we don't want this to be, or I don't want this to be something that tarnishes what really is an excellent audit with excellent outcomes. And so thank you for that. We're going to go ahead and go to council questions and to see if our council members have any specific questions for either Sarah or Lindsay at this time. Councilmember Heller.
Yes. Lindsay, I'd like to ask you a question. Thank you very much for the presentation. Can I possibly get a copy of your PowerPoint? Would that be a possibility?
Oh, yes, no problem.
That's my question for you. And
definitely.
Question I have in general, Mayor, is I must be honest, I am very much dependent annually on CFAC's questions and review of this report, and I'm a little bit at a loss without having their comments, and I'm wondering what you think about that.
Think you're asking staff?
I'm asking you, Mayor.
You're asking me?
Yeah.
I have absolutely no problem, because you're looking at the professional group who are auditors that audit financials of cities on a routine basis. They have rules that they must follow to do that. I think the initial review by CFAC, in my opinion, was at times helpful, but also a bit tedious and redundant, in my opinion. Not that I don't think CFAC does excellent work, but the audit is the audit, the findings are the findings, and I always, appreciate what not only management has to say, but the auditor. That's what I look for. So, personal opinion. Thanks.
Okay. Well, I don't understand accounting as well as I probably should. I should have paid closer attention in my accounting class when I got my master's degree. So I depend on others. But Lindsay, it's an outstanding report. I appreciate your efforts. And Sarah, for you to jump in and assemble a staff quickly and at really the wrong time. Great job on your part. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah. Thanks, Councilmember Heller.
That's all I have. Thanks.
You bet. Other questions for council members? Before I go to public comment, yes, Councilmember Ford, please.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mrs. Johnson-Rios and Ms. Zimmerman. Great reports by both of you. Quite extensive. And as Councilmember Heller said, I should have paid a little bit more attention in accounting. However, it is very, it's very spelled out and fairly easy to understand. I do have a question regarding, the explanation of, turnover. We've had quite a bit of it, as has been mentioned. Hopefully we don't have that in the near future. I love our staff, just putting that out there. However, in the case that we do have turnover again, and say it happens a few times and, you know, in close proximity, have we established or have we implemented something, measures that can prevent these sorts of discrepancies or miscommunications in the future in the case that we do have the same situation happen or something similar? Is there ways to prevent that, or have we taken those measures?
Councilmember Ford, would you like...
I don't know who would answer it. Sorry.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I can start, and then certainly feel free to add anything, Lindsay. You know, I think that there are great foundations. I think we need to build on them as time permits and get more specific, like I mentioned earlier, with some of our internal procedures. I think the council approved policy framework is really strong. Pieces of the internal details are also strong, and there are pieces that we would like to further strengthen. My suspicion, which is just conjecture, is that, you know, prior staff teams have also been quite overextended. And so my assumption is that they've been really focused on churning out the work and staying on the treadmill as we currently are. And so we will be, that's part of our kind of resource analysis, is that we want to ensure that we do have the time to dedicate to that type of internal procedural documentation, succession planning, continuity of operations, et cetera.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Ford. Councilmember Addis, please.
Thank you, Mayor. It's not so much a question as it is a comment, just to thank the presenter and thank staff on this. I remember the times when we had year after year of findings, and they were not double digit, but they were many more than what we've had now. So I consider this a win, and I just want to make that comment before we go to public comment and bring it back.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. If there are no further questions, I'm going to go ahead and open up public comment. This is public comment for item C-2 on our agenda. Public comment is now open. And let's see, Highland, do we have any public comments, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First up, we have Betty Winholtz.
Okay, welcome, Betty.
Thank you. This is Betty Winholtz again. I just have two questions. One is on page 60. The audit has pointed this out about transfers, and I'm wondering why the transfer from the Harbor Department is higher than the transfers from water and sewer, particularly in light of the WRF and how much that has been demanding on general fund time of those employees. And so that's my first question, why that Harbor is higher than the others and how that's determined. And then my second question, excuse me, is on page 64. And the years go by steady until 2027, and then it appears there's a large figure. Is that something I don't understand, or is that a balloon payment year? Could you please explain that? Thank you.
Thank you. Next public comment, Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next up, we have Courtney Shepler.
All right. Welcome, Courtney.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I am brand new to CFAC and also relatively new to Morro Bay. So this was my first annual report to review. So I welcome feedback from other CFAC members that may be on with us today. I will say that we had, very limited time, as I think you all did as well, to review this quite lengthy document. So I hope in future years we can have a little bit more time and have time to explore any questions around this. But I do think this is a very thorough report and will give us a good foundation for CFAC to evaluate other opportunities over the coming year. Lindsay, thank you for your report. It was very thorough, and I totally, as a CPA myself and former auditor, not a governmental auditor, but I do appreciate the challenge of, trying to take on a new engagement like this during a very disruptive time in all of our lives, and having, staffing challenges. I know all the professional services are experiencing staffing challenges as well as the city. But do you have any recommendations for city management to explore in terms of, areas that you spotted that were particularly challenging for this city that you don't see in other cities where they could explore either, evaluating opportunities for improvement or outsourcing or any other suggestions that you have that, are a little more consultative in nature versus a test?
Thank you, Courtney. Next public comment, Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have no more raised hands in the queue.
Yeah, I'll close public comment, bring it back. I don't know who wants to take it, probably Lindsay, but a detailed question on page 60 of the ACFR regarding the transfers. I think you may have noted that. Do you have anything to say about that, or did you catch it?
Yeah, I did catch it, and I don't have the detail of the transfers handy. Sorry about that. So
that's okay.
Yeah.
Perhaps what we could do is email Ms. Winholtz with the answer to that question. Would that be?
Yeah, I can get back. Yeah.
Okay. And then the same thing on page 64. She had a general question there about the figures, and maybe perhaps we could also email her the answer to that question too, since.
I believe I can answer that one unless.
Oh, great. Go ahead, Sarah. If you want to answer that one, go ahead.
That is a bit confusing in the display, but what Ms. Winholtz was referring to was a range of years that presents a sum total of the principal and interest payments across those 5 years. So there is no balloon payment.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then Lindsay, one of our Citizens Finance Advisory Committee members, who happens to be a former auditor, CPA, had a general question for you about opportunities for improvement. And I'm sure you caught that, but we'd love to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, definitely. Emily and I have been going in detail on figuring out a lot of the processes and the way that we get to the right dollar amounts, whether it's with the drawdowns, the pension, OPEB, some of the kind of key areas that I think that we can really work together on figuring out the best checks and balances to make sure that those are properly presented. Going through in detail on a kind of a year-end checklist of making sure that every bank rec is approved, signed off, agreed, everything from kind of start to finish of mainly a year-end checklist, I think would really help in terms of getting that detailed documentation of the step-by-step and that approval process. So Emily and I are working through that, and also with Sarah, just making sure we have the proper documentation. And just, I think a lot of times it's just hard with such a small staff, just being able to get through everything on their own. We helped assist with some of the pension OPEB entries, government-wide conversions, that sort of thing. So just being able to work through that as an audit team and as a management team, and just making sure that we're all on the same page and working through those properly.
Great, appreciate that answer. This is a receive and file this evening. I'll just add my comments again. Kudos to staff and our new auditors. Appreciate the great work that you've done. Sarah, could you please pass down to your staff our gratitude?
I will. And Emily, I appreciate you saying that, Mayor, because Emily Conrad is on the meeting. If she wants to show her face, she was really the primary person behind this gargantuan effort, and she deserves all the credit. So thank you for that.
Well, Emily, thank you. I didn't realize you were on with us tonight, but we appreciate you greatly. And we know you're a new addition to the team, but we are so grateful to have you, and appreciate you working with the auditors. I know, having been through audits before in my previous career, how difficult that can be sometimes. No disrespect to you, Lindsay, but it's a tedious, long process, and often very nerve-wracking. But thanks again to your staff. I wanted to just call out one other thing. this is my 7th audit for the city. The first 3 were the worst I think I've ever seen in my career. Not blaming anybody or any staff. None of the staff here were here then at the time, but we had numerous management issues, policy issues. The management letter was lengthy, and all of those issues, for the most part, have been taken care of. And it sounds like, unfortunately, we suffered through a fairly significant transition of individuals, including the key leadership position before Ms. Johnson-Rios joined us. And no disrespect to the staff that was there, it was very difficult. If you go back to the original management partners engagement that we had over 10 years ago, it was recommended then that we were understaffed and needed to beef up the finance department. And I'm glad that this council has approved the resources, hopefully, that are necessary for you, Sarah, to be successful in the future. And so I just wanted to call that out. I do believe it's an anomaly. Thanks for the answer to the issues that have been raised, or the issue that's been raised, and what you plan to do to fix it. I have full confidence that with your leadership and Emily's leadership, it will happen. And so again, this is a receive and file. I'll just share that it would have been nice to have a little more time to review this with CFAC, and I think we'll make that a priority next year. I'll just apologize to our CFAC folks that wasn't able to happen this year, but we do want to make that a priority next year to make sure that we have that interactive type of collaboration with them. So unless there are any other comments, again, this is receive and file. Again, Lindsay, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. We'll see you next year.
Yes, thank you all so much. Have a great
evening.
evening.
All right, thank you. That ends this item, brings us to item C-3. This is the establishment of a city council subcommittee to spearhead activities related to the climate emergency initiative as established by resolution number 20-22. And I think I'm turning it over to Mr. Collins, and it says the city clerk, Dana.
You are correct, and I'm pulling up the item as we speak. But essentially what we're looking for from council is their support for the formation of a subcommittee of council members to support the work of staff and engagement of our community on climate action related items. This was a request to come back at the last council meeting in February. And so if there is a desire to form such a subcommittee, we'd want to make sure that there's a specific purpose outlined so that those members have that homing device to look back towards, and they meet together and with staff to make sure we're working in concert with what the overall thrust of the committee is from council's perspective. So happy to answer any questions, but again, it's pretty short and simple. Is there a desire to create the subcommittee, and what would be the specific purpose of that committee, so that we have that in writing somewhere?
Great, and I'll just ask, first of all, if there are any questions, and then I'll go to public comment, and then I'll bring it back to us. So, Councilmember Heller, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So Scott, my question is to you, because I know your staff is super busy and we have some very ambitious goals. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts in terms of, from a staff perspective, what would be the most cost-effective process for you to take on this project? In other words, are there other options besides the subcommittee option that might require less staff time but accomplish the same kinds of things that we're trying to attain?
Great question, Councilmember Heller. Certainly, there are different ways of going at this, and different combinations that could be supportive of this recommendation as well. Scott Graham and Greg Kwolek and their staff are kind of the primary implementers of the climate action items that are identified for short-term actions, the 2022 goals process. I think having support of council members who are really, energized around this goal could help kind of supplement some of our work, especially if it's to get other groups involved, or other, inspired members of our community to help support the efforts and get more people to make changes in their lives. So I could see it as being an additive. Certainly subcommittees can create additional work, but if it's set up correctly, it can definitely be supplemental of what we're already doing.
So as another option, would another option be to the key people that you've just named, kind of put together some basic facts and options and so forth that are out there that make sense for our city, and then perhaps present them to council first and then form a subcommittee to take it further? Or I'm just trying to figure out the most efficient, cost-effective way to tackle this.
Yeah, that's definitely an option. I mean, I think in essence, we have somewhat done that. I guess at a more higher level with the goals that council adopted. We said here are kind of the short-term action items that we believe can be accomplished in the next 12 to 14 months. Things like putting information on the website and having a week dedicated towards climate action efforts for our community. Looking at electrification of new residential developments. I'm probably blanking on a few things like reviewing the battery project if that comes forward. Those kind of things that work we're going to do because that's what council requested as a body for us to do. I guess where I see the value of the subcommittee is sort of how do we help get the word out on those things, and how do we make it additive with community members, because council members may have more reach into the community than staff. So, but in essence, I think Councilmember Heller, we have somewhat done that. Of course, that's not the end of the list. There's probably a lot more other things we could do, and staff could certainly vet other options to consider as far as future actions to take, whether it's electric vehicle policies or revising or updating our climate action plan or seeking funding for those efforts would sort of be the next step of things. So I could see us doing it either way. So really it's up to council how you want to approach it.
Okay. Thank you for brainstorming a little bit.
Yeah, of course.
Appreciate that.
No problem.
Those are my questions, Mayor. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Councilmember Heller. Good question. Other questions, first of all? Seeing no hands being raised. Okay. I'll go ahead and go to public comment. This is public comment for item C-3 in our agenda. Public comment for C3 is open now. And Highland, do we have any public comments, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have no raised hands in the queue.
Hey, I'll close public comment, bring it back to council. There we go. There you are. And entertain further discussion, motion. What's your pleasure?
I'll move to.
I see, Councilmember.
Yep.
So what are you? She put down her hand. Councilmember Addis. I'm sorry.
I put my hand down. Go for it.
I'll
Okay.
defer to Councilmember Ford if she had her hand up first.
It's kind of one of those visual things. Yeah, Councilmember Ford, please.
Okay. Well, I'll allow, or not allow, but I will entertain Councilmember Addis on her. I'll let her finish her motion in just a moment. But I just want, I guess I do want a little bit of clarification here. Moving forward, I asked for this to come to, to be placed on the agenda and for us to consider having a subcommittee. At the time, it was sort of hey, in response to this major declaration that we just made, and feeling like, as council members, I really want to unburden the staff as much as possible. And so I guess in forming the subcommittee, if we do move forward with it, I really want to take it from the angle of, doing what it is that we can to lessen the workload for our staff. I know on paper, it kind of looks like we're adding a lot more workload because, staff has to attend these meetings and so on and so forth. But I really want to form this subcommittee to where we're doing, as council members, whoever those two members are doing the bulk of the work and not necessarily the staff. So I don't know how to, maybe Councilmember Addis already has something in mind as far as how to word the doings of this committee, the inner workings of this committee. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely a concern of mine, is that that is my main goal, is to get that information out, make sure we're doing all that we can as a community to help with climate action, but also to alleviate some of those, those tasks. So anyways, that wasn't very well said or articulated. So I'm just now going to pass the mic over to Councilmember Addis so she can say it much more beautifully.
Yeah, Councilmember Addis.
Oh, I don't know that I have anything beautiful to say, but I was gonna move to approve the subcommittee. I'm fine with it if there's a couple council members that want to dig in and do some good work around climate. I invite that kind of involvement and that initiative, and I do think there's some other subcommittees that there isn't work getting done, and maybe at some other time, future agenda item time, we could talk about that. But I'm excited. Council has really wrapped its arms around the idea of climate action. We declared a climate emergency. We have some of the largest projects on the Central Coast, possibly in California, when it comes to climate action. And I find it absolutely inspiring that we have council members that want to put even more time into solving this crisis. So for that reason, I move to approve the subcommittee.
Motion by Councilmember Addis. I assume Councilmember Ford, perhaps you have a second for that, given your. Okay, so you have a motion and a second. And then we'll go to comments. Councilmember Heller. Yes, I see your hand, sir.
Thank you. And Councilmember Ford, you did fine. I understood completely what you said, so don't worry about it. It was very, very clear to me, As I asked earlier, I'm really looking for the most efficient way to do this. First off, let me just throw my hat in the ring. I would love to be on this subcommittee. My involvement with waste management has been very important to me, and I've been involved with energy conservation in terms of buildings for over 20 years. So I'm very interested in this topic. My thought is, since we have an enormous amount of information in our general plan, which took us 5 years to develop, there's an enormous amount of information relative to climate change in there. There's an existing climate action plan. My thought is that let's form the subcommittee of 2 with no staff involved, sort through all the information that already exists that we've taken years to develop, pull that out, pull it into bullet points, and then start to take some staff time and just say, hey, what's feasible here? There's so much information out there, and I really don't want to bog down staff until I think we can accumulate a lot of information without taking staff time at all. So that's kind of my thought at this point. So I don't know, Councilmember Addis, if you're interested in a friendly amendment or not, but I would like to suggest that we do that.
I don't know if it's the purview for us to get super detailed on how the subcommittee moves forward. I guess I would need to defer to staff or somebody on how detailed we get when we're approving a subcommittee. My gut reaction is I'd like to leave this broad because I'd like the subcommittee to be able to do the work that it needs to do. But I do see City Attorney Newmeyer here who has something to say on this.
I was, good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. So the City Council should establish a purpose, and it's up to the City Council how broad or narrow that purpose is, if that helps answer the question on what you're discussing.
And since we're in discussion, I'll weigh in. One, there is no existing subcommittee that doesn't involve staff, and so unilaterally, I would not support anything where I know Councilmember Heller, where you were going, minimize their time, but on every subcommittee that we have, staff is intimately involved in assisting us and guiding us. So I think that's important. And number 2, if the motion passes with 2 individuals, perhaps it might volunteer. I think the first thing we would want to do is in our future agenda item, have you come back with a purpose statement, which Chris alluded to. We have purpose statements for all of the subcommittees, and not a reaffirmation of goals or anything else, but specifically what is the committee's role and function. And without that guiding document or guiding statement, it's nebulous. And so those are my feelings. So we do have a motion and a second. I'll take further discussion. Councilmember Heller has kind of put his hat in the ring. Thank you for that. Maybe his hand too, because I see it up every once in a while. It's up. I see it now. Councilmember Ford, yes. Comment.
Thank you, Mayor. I as well would like to throw my hat in the ring. You know, I feel like, you know, I threw the idea out there, so I need to be willing to also step up and be on the subcommittee if council wishes. So I just want to put that out there.
So we could do one of two things. We could go ahead with the motion to establish a subcommittee and see how that plays out, or we could ask the motion maker and the second to reframe it with a specific recommendation for which council members to appoint and consider bringing back at a future meeting the purpose of the subcommittee. I'm open to either. I'll turn to the motion makers to decide how you want to proceed. So it's either withdraw and restate or move forward.
Well, do we have more than 2 people that are volunteering to be on the subcommittee?
So, oh, by the way, is anybody else interested?
Yes, I am very interested.
So we have council member. I am not. Not that I'm not interested in the subject. I'm overwhelmed as it is and on a number of subcommittees. So I'll be happy to bow out. So we have Councilmember Heller, Barton, and Ford.
I think I'd like to leave the motion as is,
Okay.
Establish the subcommittee, and then do a separate vote to establish who's on the subcommittee.
Thank you. And then also maybe perhaps with that second motion, we could also include purpose.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So we do have a motion and a second, and the motion is to establish a subcommittee as noted in the staff report. See, Councilmember Addis made the motion, and I have forgotten who made the second. Was it Councilmember Ford? Thank you. So any further discussion on that motion, then we'll move forward. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Addis,
Yes.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Councilmember Heller,
Yes.
Councilmember Barton,
Yes.
and Mayor Heading.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right, I'll entertain a motion, perhaps considering individual appointments and purpose statement. If anybody's interested.
I'll move to approve Councilmember Barton and Councilmember Ford, and I just want to say this is no ding to Councilmember Heller, and I really hope it's not taken that way. I've just seen the verve and the vim and the verve from Councilmember Barton and Councilmember Ford to attack this issue, and so I'm going to put that motion on the floor. But it
Okay.
is, I'll just reiterate, it is not a criticism of anybody else.
Okay, so we do have a motion to approve Councilmember Ford and Barton. And is there a second? So I'll second that. So we do have a motion and a second, and I'll ask for discussion. Hearing none, roll call vote, please, ma'am.
Councilmember Addis,
Yes.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Councilmember Heller,
No. Absolutely not.
Councilmember Barton,
Yes.
and Mayor Heading.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Thank you for that light moment. And then I do think I would entertain perhaps a motion for bringing back a purpose statement, if anybody's so inclined. I'll make that motion that we ask the subcommittee members as their first action to come back with a purpose statement for the subcommittee.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Mayor Heading, second by Councilmember Addis to bring back a purpose statement. Any further discussion on that? All right, and our third roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Addis,
Yes.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Councilmember Heller,
Yes.
Councilmember Barton,
Yes.
and Mayor Heading.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you for that spirited discussion. That brings us to item D, council declaration of future agenda items. I have one. By way of information, the city mayors, not representing the city council, just individuals as mayors, are putting together a joint resolution in support of Ukraine that we will be publicly unveiling. Again, not representing the city council, just mayors individually making a statement. And I would like to bring back that same resolution for consideration by the city council to approve and adopt at a future meeting. So if I have support for that, that would be great. Okay.
Yes.
In some heads. All right. Thank you for that. Any other items? Councilmember Addis.
I don't know if it's a future agenda item, but just the talk of subcommittees got me thinking about the variety of liaisonships and subcommittees where maybe that work is no longer happening, and it might be good to kind of do some kind of an audit of that and get rid of things that aren't actually happening anymore.
Very timely. I'll just report Councilmember Barton and myself were gracefully appointed by you all to have us review the handbook and policy book. And one of our purposes will be to review exactly that, purpose of liaisons. And so our first meeting is tomorrow. So we will be bringing that back if that's okay, rather than.
Yep,
okay.
Perfect.
Perfect. All right. Anything else for the greater good this evening? Well, thank you all for a great meeting. The next meeting of the Morro Bay City Council will be held on Tuesday, March 22nd, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. via teleconference for the last time, hopefully. Thank you. Good evening. Be safe and be well.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.